In this video, we are breaking down 3 hours of Family Guy mysteries and theories. Let's get started, beginning with Lois's true lineage and the silent Rothschild parallel. The Pewterschmidt fortune is not just old money, it is founding father money, with a paper trail that reeks of the kind of dynastic control that makes conspiracy theorists look reasonable. Canonically, the family were among the first to colonize America from England, settling in Newport, Rhode Island, where their primary estate, complete with ocean views and architectural grandeur that mirrors the Vanderbilt's 1893 Breakers Mansion, stands as a monument to generational wealth that predates the American experiment itself. But this is where the banking dynasty parallels stop being subtle and start getting genuinely unsettling. Carter Roosevelt Pewterschmidt does not just own businesses. He owns the kind of businesses that form the skeleton of American infrastructure. U.S. Steel, one of the most historically significant corporations in American industrial history, is his. Pewterschmidt Industries, described in Grumpy Old Man as a $6 billion empire that would collapse without Carter's influence, operates with tentacles stretching into shipping, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, telecommunications, aerospace, and biotech. This is not diversification for profit margins. This is systems-level control. And Carter's middle name deserves a second look. Roosevelt, not as in my parents liked Teddy, but as in a direct genealogical tie to American political aristocracy. The show does not explicitly confirm a blood relation, but Family Guy does not hand out presidential surnames as middle names without thematic intent. Carter plays poker with people who run CNN, as revealed across multiple episodes. In Tea Peter, he successfully manipulated the Tea Party movement to manufacture grassroots support for shutting down Quahog's entire municipal government, not for ideological reasons, but specifically to eliminate pollution regulations, so Pewterschmidt Industries could dump chemical waste without oversight. Sit with that for a second. A private citizen orchestrated the collapse of local democracy through astroturfed political theater, and it worked. Mayor Adam West folded within days. The town descended into chaos, basic services vanished, garbage piled up, and the entire community became a libertarian nightmare within 5 days. But Carter got exactly what he wanted, and when Peter finally exposed the pollution scheme and reformed the government as something entirely new, Carter faced zero legal consequences for what was functionally a corporate coup. Barbara's backstory adds layers of European intrigue that the show treats as throwaway details, but which are actually foundational to understanding the family's true nature. Her maiden name was Hebrewberg, and Family Guy canonically reveals she is a Holocaust survivor who concealed her Jewish identity when she married Carter. Why? So Carter could gain access to elite country clubs that barred Jews, which both characters agree was the right thing to do. A line so casually monstrous, it almost gets lost in the episode's pacing. But that detail tells us something important. The Pewterschmidts operate in circles where old-world European prejudices still dictate access to power, and they are willing to commit identity erasure to maintain that access. Barbara was not just wealthy in her own right. In Absolutely Babulous, she admits she grew up in more humble beginnings in Weekapaug, Rhode Island, and only maintains a facade of class to please Carter. Translation: she married into the dynasty, adapted to its rules, and helped perpetuate its social engineering. The Pewterschmidt real estate portfolio reads like a money laundering operation disguised as heritage preservation. Beyond their Newport mansion, they owned Cherrywood Manor, established in Peter, Caviar Eater, as a sprawling estate the family inherited and used as their residence. But the property's history is where things get dark. The manor was originally a brothel where historical American figures, including Ulysses S. Grant, hired prostitutes. Family Guy plays this for laughs, but consider the implications. The Pewterschmidts own a property that was functionally a compromise factory during the Reconstruction era, a place where powerful politicians engaged in activities that could destroy their careers if exposed. Did the original Pewterschmidt owners keep records? Did they leverage that information? The show never says explicitly, but it establishes that this family has been adjacent to American power since the nation's founding, and their wealth has always existed in morally compromised spaces. And then there is the slavery connection revealed in Peter Griffin: husband, father, brother. When Carter accidentally admits that one of his ancestors was a slave owner who owned Nate Griffin, Peter's direct ancestor. This is not symbolic. The Pewterschmidt family literally owned the Griffin bloodline. For generations, they exercised legal, economic, and physical control over Peter's family, and that power dynamic never truly dissolved. It just evolved. Carter still treats Peter like property, forcing him to perform degrading acts, eating a pine cone and describing its taste in model misbehavior, drinking a vial of diabetic blood in Padre de Familia in exchange for basic assistance. The dynastic control shifted from legal slavery to economic coercion, but the fundamental relationship, Pewterschmidt dominance over Griffin's subjugation, remained intact across centuries. And Lois, by marrying Peter, did not escape the system. She brought Peter deeper into it, because here is the revelation that recontextualizes everything. Carter and Barbara pay for the Griffin's house. This is canon, confirmed in Throw It Away. Peter does not own 31 Spooner Street. The Pewterschmidts do. Every mortgage payment, every property tax bill, every structural repair is subsidized by Carter's empire. Lois did not rebel against her family's wealth by marrying a working-class brewery employee. She extended her family's control over another generation by ensuring her children would be raised in Pewterschmidt-owned real estate, dependent on Pewterschmidt money, forever tethered to the dynasty, regardless of Peter's blue-collar aesthetic. It is brilliant, really. Carter hates Peter, openly despises him, and offered him $1 million not to marry Lois in Death Lives. But once the marriage happened, Carter did not disown Lois. He invested in her, making sure his grandchildren would be raised under his financial umbrella, where his influence could shape them, despite Peter's idiocy. Now consider Peter's impossible immunity from consequences, because this is where the Rothschild parallel becomes less metaphor and more documentary. Peter has committed crimes that would result in multiple life sentences if prosecuted, even in a cartoon justice system. He bombed a children's hospital in an episode that is literally about him bombing a children's hospital. 3 stories engulfed in flames, multiple deaths, arson, terrorism charges, and received a 7-day sentence. That is not lenient. That is theatrical. Someone with Carter's resources could absolutely engineer a scenario where Peter's catastrophic crimes get plea bargained down to misdemeanors, where evidence mysteriously disappears, where judges receive campaign contributions from Pewterschmidt-adjacent super PACs. In Shanksgiving, Peter deliberately gets arrested to avoid Thanksgiving dinner and ends up in a state penitentiary due to overcrowding, meaning Quahog's municipal jail was full, yet he still got released early after nearly starting a prison riot. In Cool Hand, Peter, a corrupt sheriff, plants drugs on Peter and imprisons him in a county work camp, extending his sentence indefinitely, but the gang escapes and faces no consequences for the prison break. The pattern is unmistakable. When Peter commits crimes in Quahog, where the Pewterschmidts hold influence, consequences evaporate, and when he commits crimes outside Pewterschmidt territory, the system tries to crush him, but he escapes through cartoon logic. Meg even states the quiet part out loud in her famous rant, that if someone in the outside world could see the way Peter treats her, he would be in jail. She is right. The only reason he is not is that the outside world does not see what happens in Quahog, and even if it did, the infrastructure that would prosecute him is compromised. Carter's proven willingness to corrupt law enforcement is established canon in the Family Guy video game, which is canon to the show's continuity. Carter bribes police officers to falsely accuse Brian of impregnating his greyhound Seabreeze, then bribes them again to beat Brian up before throwing him in jail. Carter views police as employees, and why would he not? He is wealthy enough to own the systems that fund their pensions, equipment, and departmental budgets. In The Old Man and the Big C, Brian and Stewie discover that Pewterschmidt Industries has developed a cure for cancer, but Carter refuses to release it publicly because treating cancer is more profitable than curing it. When confronted by Lois, he promises to release the cure just for her, then does not, and faces zero consequences for lying to his daughter about withholding medicine that could save millions of lives. The same episode reveals that Carter gave an entire town cancer through Pewterschmidt Industries' chemical waste dumping. He is not just profiting from illness, he is creating it, then monopolizing the treatment. This is systems-level evil that requires systems-level protection. You do not poison a town, refuse to release a cancer cure, and walk away unless you control the regulatory agencies that would investigate you, the media outlets that would expose you, and the courts that would prosecute you. And Carter demonstrably controls all three. When he wanted to shut down Quahog's government, he did not need to bribe officials. He just manufactured public outrage and let democracy eat itself. When he wanted to avoid cancer treatment consequences, there was no investigation, no EPA intervention, no class action lawsuit. The system did not fail to hold Carter accountable. It worked exactly as designed to protect Pewterschmidt interests. The Griffins are not shielded by cartoon logic or sitcom conventions where consequences reset between episodes. They are protected by proximity to a dynasty that has embedded itself into American power structures for over 2 centuries, that owns the literal infrastructure. U.S. Steel having built the skeleton of industrial America, that holds compromise on historical figures through the Cherrywood brothel, that can manipulate grassroots political movements through Tea Party astroturfing, that bribes law enforcement as casually as tipping a valet, and that has genealogical control over the Griffin bloodline itself dating back to the slavery era. Peter's crimes do not have consequences because the Pewterschmidts have spent generations ensuring their sphere of influence operates above the law. Lois did not escape that world by marrying Peter. She brought Peter into it, and he is too stupid to realize he is not getting away with murder through luck. He is getting away with it because his father-in-law owns the county and probably the state, and has enough political capital to make problems disappear the way old money families have since the Gilded Age. The Rothschild parallel is not lazy shorthand. It is the show telling you, in plain sight, that the Pewterschmidts are a dynasty built on the same foundations as any European banking family that quietly shaped governments through financial leverage, strategic marriages, compromise, and multi-generational patience. They are not parodies, they are portraits, and every time Peter walks away from a crime scene without handcuffs, it is not because Family Guy is a cartoon, it is because in Quahog, Rhode Island, the Pewterschmidts are the law. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you are enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Meg's real parentage. The canonical evidence that Meg is not Peter's biological daughter lives in plain sight, casually dropped in Screwed the Pooch when Brian testifies in court that Meg's real father is Stan Thompson. Peter does not react, Lois does not object, and Meg does not hear it because she is wearing headphones, a narratively convenient detail that lets this bombshell sit uncontested in the show's official record. Family Guy never revisits Stan Thompson, never explains him, never acknowledges the legal or emotional implications of this revelation, and that absence is not sloppy writing, but protective silence. Because if you trace Meg's parentage through the show's established lore, you do not land on a random affair or a broken condom. You land on something far more calculated, a genetic experiment designed by Carter Pewterschmidt and executed by Dr. Elmer Hartman to create a Pewterschmidt heir who could pass as average, concealing dynastic wealth behind deliberately mediocre features. The etymology is not coincidence, it is confession. Megan, phonetically close to Meg and to genetic, positions her as a self-referential genetic product, an experiment whose name telegraphs the method of creation. Peter even changed her birth certificate to Megatron in A Fistful of Meg, which reads as crude humor until you consider the Transformers character's origin, a robot engineered for a specific purpose, then repurposed and discarded when that purpose failed. Meg was made, not conceived through passion or accident, but manufactured through calculated genetic selection with the explicit goal of producing a Pewterschmidt heir who would not be recognized as one. Here is why Carter would commission this. The Pewterschmidts control billions in assets across industries that shape American infrastructure: U.S. steel, pharmaceuticals, shipping, telecommunications. But dynastic visibility attracts scrutiny. Old money families who flaunt their power eventually face regulation, taxation, and public backlash. The Rothschilds understood this, the Rockefellers learned it, and Carter, who operates with generational foresight, his family founded American colonies after all, would absolutely commission a genetic heir designed to blend into middle-class obscurity, someone who would inherit Pewterschmidt assets through trusts and shell corporations without ever appearing on Forbes lists or congressional hearing rosters. Meg's deliberate averageness is not cruel humor from the writers, it is camouflage engineering. She was designed to be ignored, and the show canonically confirms Carter and Dr. Hartman work together. Hartman is explicitly stated to be Carter's personal physician in multiple episodes, their identical voices acknowledged in Believe It or Not, Joe's Walking on Air, when Peter comments that they sound the same, and Hartman responds that Carter is one of his patients and that there are only so many voices in the world, so some are bound to be similar. This meta-joke functions as narrative cover, explaining away the voice similarity while establishing a professional relationship that runs deep enough to warrant regular interaction. When you are a billionaire industrialist with a secret pharmaceuticals lab revealed in The Old Man and The Big C to be hoarding a cancer cure for profit, you do not hire a random incompetent doctor as your personal physician unless that incompetence is strategic misdirection, or unless he possesses specialized expertise you need off the books. And Hartman possesses that expertise. In New Kidney in Town, while discussing Peter's kidney transplant, he casually mentions that while attempting to clone a chicken, he inadvertently created the giant chicken. This gets glossed over as a throwaway gag explaining Ernie the giant chicken's origin, but parse what Hartman just admitted. He has access to cloning technology, genetic manipulation capabilities, advanced enough to produce a viable, if monstrous, organism, and the resources to conduct these experiments without institutional oversight. He is not cloning chickens at Quahog Hospital. He is doing it somewhere with funding and equipment that would not exist for a small-town general practitioner unless a private benefactor, someone like Carter, bankrolled the research. Pewterschmidt Industries operates a pharmaceuticals division sophisticated enough to synthesize a cancer cure that Carter deliberately suppresses. If they can cure cancer, they can manipulate genetic code. If Hartman can clone organisms, he can engineer designer offspring. The infrastructure for creating Meg already exists in the show's established canon. What is missing is the motive and the method, both of which align perfectly once you accept that Meg was commissioned rather than conceived. Here is the likely timeline. Lois, young and rebellious against Pewterschmidt expectations, dated Peter, a working-class towel boy at the country club. Carter despised the relationship, offering Peter $1 million not to marry her in death lives, but Lois married Peter anyway, which meant any children they produced would be genetic dilutions of the Pewterschmidt bloodline, raised in a blue-collar household with zero understanding of how to manage dynastic wealth. Unacceptable. So Carter commissioned an alternative, a child who would carry Pewterschmidt genetics but be raised by Peter and Lois without their knowing the truth, ensuring the heir remained humble, unnoticed, and positioned to inherit later without the entitlement or visibility that destroys legacies. Dr. Hartman's role: genetic donor selection and implantation. The show establishes multiple contradictory versions of Meg's birth. She is born with her heart on her head in Friends Without Benefits, explaining her hat. She is named Megatron on her birth certificate in A Fistful of Meg. Peter mistakes her for a boy in I Never Met the Dead Man. They almost abandon her at a fire station in Screwed the Pooch and consider abortion in Stewie Kills Lois. These are not continuity errors, they are narrative mutations, the show's reality rejecting a memory that does not align with biological truth. If Meg was conceived through standard reproduction, her birth story would not fracture across episodes, but if her origin involved genetic manipulation, medical intervention, and deliberate deception, then the Griffins' memories of that event would be unstable, revised, and contradictory, because the truth was never accessible to them in the first place. Lois does not remember Meg's birth clearly because she was likely sedated during a procedure disguised as routine prenatal care. Hartman, working under Carter's directive, could have easily implanted a genetically engineered embryo into Lois without her knowledge, using Peter and Lois's DNA as a baseline but optimizing for specific Pewter-Schmidt traits: intelligence, latent and buried under social anxiety; resilience, since Meg endures relentless abuse and never breaks; and, most critically, genetic stability that allows for drastic phenotypic transformation. Which brings us to Don't Make Me Over. Meg receives a makeover at the mall: hair, makeup, contact lenses instead of glasses, and transforms from ugly to devastatingly attractive. The episode presents this as superficial cosmetic change, but phenotypic shifts that extreme do not happen with lipstick and a blow-dryer. Bone structure does not change, facial proportions do not realign, yet Meg goes from universally rejected to sexually objectified by a record producer and seduced by a celebrity on live television, all from a free makeover. What the episode actually depicts is the activation of dormant genetic code. Meg's baseline appearance, glasses, hat, frumpy clothes, hunched posture, is not her natural state, but a suppressed phenotype, deliberately engineered to present as unremarkable until triggered by specific environmental conditions. The makeover was not cosmetic intervention, it was a catalyst that activated the Pewter-Schmidt genetics coded into her DNA, allowing her true appearance, the one designed to be beautiful, charismatic, and marketable, to surface. This explains why her attractiveness feels alien to her family, why the transformation is so absolute, and why she reverts at the end of the episode, saying being beautiful is too much work. She is not rejecting vanity, she is resuppressing the activated genes, because maintaining that phenotype requires conscious effort to override the default that makes her invisible. This also explains Peter and Lois's treatment of Meg. On some unconscious level, they know she is not theirs. Peter admits he thought Meg was a house cat for 4 years. Lois provides Meg with food waste for school lunch and taunting pictures. They tried to abort her, abandon her, sell her. This is not comedic exaggeration of bad parenting, it is biological rejection. Humans possess subconscious mechanisms for detecting genetic relatedness, and studies on step families show that non-biological parents invest less emotionally and financially in stepchildren even when they consciously believe they are bonded. Peter and Lois's cruelty toward Meg reads as pathological until you accept that they are responding to a biological truth their conscious minds cannot access. Meg is not their daughter. She is Carter's genetic project, implanted without their knowledge, and their parental instincts never fully activated because the genetic recognition signals were absent. Brian, the only family member who occasionally defends Meg, is also the one who revealed Stan Thompson's existence, which is not coincidental. Brian, the most intelligent Griffin, likely investigated Meg's parentage and uncovered fragments of the truth, Stan Thompson may not be a person. It could be an acronym, a code name, or a fabricated identity created to obscure the true origin, or Stan Thompson is real. The genetic donor whose DNA was combined with Pewterschmidt genetics to create Meg, paid off and silenced by Carter to keep the experiment secret. Either way, Brian knows more than he is saying, which is why he drops the truth in court but never pursues it further. He is protecting Meg from a revelation that would destroy her. And Meg wears a hat constantly, explained in one version as covering a heart that was born on top of her head. Symbolically, this is perfect. A heart exposed outside the body is a heart vulnerable, visible, unprotected. Meg's emotions, her capacity for love and connection, were literally engineered to be external, unsheltered, a design flaw in Carter's experiment. He wanted an heir who would endure abuse without breaking, who would remain loyal despite neglect, who would operate from a place of desperate gratitude when finally acknowledged. But he did not account for the psychological toll of engineering someone to be unloved. Meg's heart, exposed and covered by a hat, represents the contradiction at her core. She was made to be invisible, but cannot stop feeling. The Pewterschmidts pay for the Griffin's house, confirmed in Throw It Away, which is not generosity, but monitoring. Carter needs Meg raised in a controlled environment where he can observe her development, ensure the genetic programming holds, and intervene if complications arise. And Dr. Hartman, as the family physician, provides regular reports, every checkup a data collection point for the long-term experiment. The theory is not speculation, but a synthesis of canonical facts the show presents and never directly connects. Meg's confirmed non-paternity via Stan Thompson, Hartman's genetic experimentation, and Carter's sponsorship, the Pewterschmidt pharmaceutical capabilities, the drastic transformation in Don't Make Me Over, the contradictory birth stories, the family's biological rejection of her, and Carter's established willingness to manipulate, suppress, and control information, whether hiding cancer cures or shutting down governments for profit and legacy preservation. Meg Griffin is not Peter and Lois's accidental daughter. She is Carter Pewterschmidt's designer heir, a genetic experiment engineered to inherit a dynasty while appearing too average to attract attention. Her name is not Megan, it is a declaration. The joke is not that Meg is ugly. The joke is that we believed she was human. Take a second to subscribe before we continue. Moving on to Brian's 9 lives being literal. Brian Griffin has died multiple times, not in cutaway gags or dream sequences, but in actual canon. He was hit by a car in Life of Brian and stayed dead for 2 full episodes before Stewie time-traveled to save him. In Stewie Griffin, The Untold Story. He sits in heaven with Van Gogh, Cobain, and Hemingway, meaning he dies in at least one future. In Road to Vegas, an alternate Brian jumps off a hotel in a suicide pact with Stewie to escape a loan shark. In Back to the Pilot, one Brian arrives with his throat cut. These are not jokes, they are canonical deaths, where Brian stops breathing, stops existing, and then somehow continues appearing in episodes, and the show never explains it. Brian just comes back, and nobody questions it. The theory is not complicated. Brian has 9 lives, not metaphorically, but literally, like a cat, because he is part cat, canonically confirmed in Fecal Matters, when he takes a DNA test and discovers he is 1% cat. That single percent is not a throwaway joke, it is the genetic key that allows Brian to resurrect. He is not a normal dog. He is a dog-cat hybrid with the one supernatural ability cats are famous for, multiple lives, and Stewie's time machine does not actually revive dead consciousness. It just reloads Brian's next available life, selecting from his remaining backup selves waiting in the queue. Start with what we know for certain. In Life of Brian, Brian gets hit by a car while setting up a street hockey net, dies at the vet, the family holds a funeral, Peter gives a speech, they bury him, a month passes, and Vinny, the Italian dog, replaces him. Then, in Christmas Guy, Stewie encounters a past version of himself who time-traveled forward to buy Christmas toys early, borrows that Stewie's return pad, goes back to the moment before Brian's death, and pushes him out of the car's path. Brian survives, and everyone acts like the death never happened. But that is not how consciousness works. If Brian died, if his brain stopped receiving oxygen, if his neurons fired their last signals, then traveling back in time and preventing the accident does not resurrect the same Brian. It creates an alternate timeline where a different version of Brian never died. The original Brian, the one who spent his last moments telling the Griffins he loved them, is still dead. Stewie did not save Brian. He replaced him with a backup copy from a parallel timeline, and the Griffins, locked into the new timeline, have no memory that their original Brian ever died, because in their current reality, he did not. Unless Brian is not operating on human rules, unless he is working on cat rules. Cats, according to folklore and the show's own canon, have 9 lives. In the episode 420, Peter adopts a cat named James, and when a prank goes wrong, Peter accidentally kills it. Then, when the guys panic, casually says cats have 9 lives and proceeds to kill the cat 8 more times, counting down with each death. It is played for horrific comedy, but it establishes show canon. Cats in the Family Guy universe literally have 9 lives, not resurrecting, but simply having 9 separate life cycles, each death burning through one life until all 9 are exhausted, after which they are dead permanently. Brian is 1% cat, revealed in fecal matters when he takes a DNA test, and the episode treats it as a joke, with Brian clawing furniture and hissing at vacuum cleaners. But DNA does not lie in this show. If Brian carries feline genetics, he carries feline traits, and if cats have 9 lives as established canon, then Brian being part cat would have 9 lives too. Maybe not the full 9 a purebred gets, his dog genetics diluting it, but enough cat DNA to qualify for the multi-life system. Which means every time Brian dies, he is not actually dying permanently. He is burning through one of his 9 lives, and when Stewie saves him via time travel, the machine is not rewriting history or resurrecting consciousness. It is pulling Brian's next life from the queue, the backup Brian who was always going to exist in the sequence. Stewie thinks he is fixing a timeline. He is actually just skipping ahead to the next life number. Count Brian's canonical deaths. Life 1 is burned in Stewie Griffin. The untold story, where we see him in heaven with famous artists who killed themselves. Brian admits he ate chocolate out of the trash, and dogs die from chocolate poisoning. So this is his first canonical death shown in continuity, happening in a future timeline, dying from stupidity rather than tragedy, but dying all the same. Life 2 is burned in Life of Brian, hit by a car, dead at the vet, buried, the most public death, the one viewers remember. But Stewie intervenes, borrowing a time machine to prevent the accident, except he does not actually bring back the Brian who died. He pulls the next Brian from the queue, creating the illusion of salvation, while the original Life 2 Brian is still dead, and Life 3 Brian takes over. Life 3 is potentially burned in Road to Vegas, where an alternate Brian jumps to his death from a hotel balcony in a suicide pact with Stewie. Tricky because it happens in a parallel universe, but the show treats alternate timeline deaths as real, the same 9-life counter. Life 4 is potentially burned in Back to the Pilot, where one Brian shows up with his throat cut, a death we do not see, but whose corpse proves it occurred. By conservative count, Brian has burned through at least 4 of his 9 lives, possibly more if off-screen deaths occurred in unseen timelines, so he is currently on Life 5 or beyond and running out of backups. This also explains Stewie's refusal to discuss Brian's mortality directly. Stewie is a genius who understands temporal mechanics, genetic engineering, and consciousness transfer. So if anyone knows Brian has multiple lives, it is Stewie. And if he knows Brian is on life 5 or 6, he would be terrified, because once those 9 lives are gone, Brian is gone permanently, and no time machine can fix that. You cannot reload a file that does not exist. In New Kidney in town, Brian offers to give both his kidneys to Peter, which would kill him, and Dr. Hartman intervenes, but Brian was ready to die. Why? Because he knows death is not permanent for him. He has spare lives in the queue, so sacrificing one for Peter is tragic but survivable. Aware he will come back as the next life. He is not suicidal, just aware of the mechanics. The show subtly reinforces this. Brian ages differently than Peter, being 6 years old at the series start and now 10, 4 years across more than 20 seasons, when dogs age 7 years for every human year and he should be geriatric by now. Yet, he is healthy, active, and mobile, because every time he burns a life, he resets, not to puppy age, but roughly where the last life left off, with refreshed biology, the cellular degradation resetting slightly. He is not immortal, just buffered by spare copies of himself waiting in the genetic queue. And here is the horrifying part. Brian does not fully remember his previous deaths. In Christmas Guy, after Stewie saves him from the car, Brian has no memory of dying, the vet, or his funeral speech, of course, because that was life 2 Brian who died. Life 3. Brian, the one Stewie pulled from the queue, never experienced those events. His last memory is setting up the hockey net. Then suddenly, Stewie is shoving him out of the way of a car for no apparent reason. The memories do not transfer between lives. Each Brian is a fresh iteration, carrying forward personality and knowledge up to the point of branching, but not the death itself. This is why Brian sometimes exhibits déjà vu or vague existential dread. In Brian and Stewie, locked in a bank vault, he admits he is afraid of dying and being forgotten, not afraid of death itself, but of permanent death, haunted by half memories of lives he did not live, but somehow knows existed. The 1% cat DNA does not just give him 9 lives, it gives him genetic memory, faint echoes of previous iterations bleeding through, so he does not consciously know he is on life 5, but deep down feels the absences. The 9 lives mechanic also explains why the universe keeps trying to kill Brian. He is not unlucky. The timeline is actively hunting him, trying to burn through his remaining lives faster. In nearly every Road to episode, he and Stewie face near-death scenarios, crashing planes, getting shot at, almost drowning, barely escaping nuclear blasts, and Stewie survives through tech and plot armor, while Brian survives because the universe keeps burning his spare lives, dying off-screen dozens of times in alternate timelines, each death filing away quietly as the next Brian loads in seamlessly. Here is the kicker. Stewie's time machine is not defective. It works exactly as designed, but it cannot create life. Only select which existing life from Brian's 9-life sequence loads into the timeline. When Stewie saves Brian in Christmas Guy, he is not reversing death. He is navigating to a node where Life 3 Brian exists instead of being hit by the car. The machine is a save file browser. It lets Stewie choose which Brian loads, but cannot generate a Brian that does not exist. Once all 9 lives are burned, the machine will have nothing to select from. Stewie will press the button and no Brian will load, just empty space where a dog used to be. And Stewie knows this. That is why he destroyed the time machine in Life of Brian. Not because time travel was dangerous, he has used it recklessly for seasons, but because he checked the life counter and realized Brian was down to his last few. He tried to make Brian permanent by refusing to skip to the next backup, but Brian died anyway, forcing Stewie to break his own rule and jump to Life 3. Now Stewie lives in constant fear. He rebuilt the machine for Christmas Guy, but afterwards stopped using it casually. No more. road to episodes recklessly gambling their lives, and when they do time travel now, it is cautious and minimal risk, because he did the math. Brian is on life 5, maybe 6, 3 or 4 spares left, and every death brings them closer to the day Stewie presses the button and nothing happens. The day Brian runs out of lives and the universe finally collects its debt. Brian does not know he is dying, but Stewie does, and it is killing him. The 1% cat DNA is not a punchline, it is a countdown. 9 lives, multiple deaths, one final ending waiting somewhere in the future. Brian Griffin is not immortal, he is just taking longer to stay dead, and eventually even 9 lives run out. If you are enjoying this, do subscribe before the next one. Moving on to Quagmire's split personality, Glenn versus Gary. Glenn Quagmire does not exist, not fully. The man living at 29 Spooner Street is a fractured consciousness operating under 2 distinct names that correspond to 2 separate identities. Glenn, the competent naval officer and airline pilot, and the predatory personality fragment that hijacks his body whenever sexual stimuli appear. The theory is not speculation, it is observable pattern recognition. Quagmire exhibits textbook dissociative identity disorder, and his catchphrase is not a joke, but a verbal trigger indicating a personality switch. When Glenn becomes the giggity alter, his voice changes, his posture shifts, his moral framework collapses, and he operates from a completely different psychological baseline. The show does not hide this, it just never names it. Start with the names. His legal name is Glenn Quagmire, revealed in Teagues for 2, and he changed his Polish surname at some point to assimilate into American military culture. But here is what is strange. He has a brother named Gary Quagmire, who is deaf and rarely mentioned, appearing in exactly 1 episode, Quagmire's Dad, where military colleagues reference a fellow sailor named Gary at the naval ball. That Gary is a different person, but the show establishes that Glenn has a brother, also named Gary, who is deaf and essentially invisible to the narrative. Why does this matter? Because Gary represents the part of Glenn that cannot hear, cannot speak, cannot process the trauma. In dissociative identity disorder, alters often represent suppressed aspects of the host personality, and a deaf brother named Gary, never seen, never acknowledged, reads as symbolic projection. Glenn created an external Gary to represent the part of himself that went silent after childhood sexual trauma, and when that internal Gary can no longer contain the damage, another alter emerges to handle what Glenn cannot, the giggity personality. The trauma is canonical. It was based on 1950s radio announcers, fast-talking, manic, performative, but that is only the giggity voice. When Quagmire operates as a pilot or discusses military service, his cadence slows, his pitch drops, and he speaks with measured professionalism, none of the frenetic energy. In Quagmire's Dad, introducing his father to Peter and Joe, Glenn speaks normally, coherent, proud, articulate, maintaining composure even as his father's stories cause him discomfort. He is present, he is Glenn. Then someone makes a sexual comment and the switch flips, the voice accelerates, the head starts bobbing. This is not comedic exaggeration, it is observable personality fragmentation. The giggity alter does not just speak differently, it inhabits Quagmire's body with completely different motor patterns, the head bobbing, the hip thrusts, the manic energy, physical tics that only manifest when the giggity personality fronts. Glenn the pilot does not move like that. Glenn stands straight, walks with military posture, controls his physical space, while giggity flails, gyrates, and invades boundaries. 2 personalities sharing one body, alternating control based on environmental triggers, and the trigger is always sexual. The show makes this explicit through a running gag. Whenever Lois says something with a sexual connotation, Quagmire appears instantly, sometimes in windows, sometimes his voice echoing from off-screen, manifesting from nowhere because the Giggity altar is always listening, waiting for sexual stimuli to justify taking control. This is not quagmire teleporting, it is dissociative switching so instantaneous that the show renders it as magical appearance. The Giggity altar living just beneath Glenn's consciousness and shoving him aside the moment sex enters the environment. Glenn has no memory of what Giggity does. In Quagmire's Baby, when his daughter is dropped at his door, Glenn genuinely wants to be a good father, tries, cares, and makes the responsible decision to give her up for adoption because he knows his lifestyle is not safe for a child. That is, Glenn making that choice, the functional adult who understands consequences. But throughout the episode, the Giggity altar keeps emerging, making inappropriate comments and sexualizing situations Glenn would never sexualize. And Glenn fights for control and loses repeatedly because the Giggity personality is stronger, fueled by decades of compulsive reenactment. The military background is where the split becomes most obvious. Glenn is canonically a U.S. Navy ensign who served with distinction, following his father, Dan, a decorated Vietnam War pilot and war hero. In episodes featuring his service, such as Death Lives, when he introduces himself as Ensign Glenn Quagmire, he wears the uniform correctly, speaks with formal military bearing, and demonstrates tactical competence. He is not a joke in those scenes, but a trained officer who earned his rank. Then the military scenes end, and he is back to being a sexual predator who commits human trafficking, established in an airport-themed episode where it is revealed he traffics women. That is not character inconsistency, that is two different people. Glenn the Navy ensign would never traffic humans, his military code would not permit it, but Glenn is not in control when those crimes happen. Giggity is, and Giggity has no moral framework, no impulse control, no capacity for empathy, existing only to pursue sexual gratification by any means. These are not Quagmire's fetishes, they are Giggity's. Glenn wanted to be a pilot, wanted to serve his country, wanted normalcy. But Glenn stopped being the primary personality decades ago, and Giggity has been fronting so long, so consistently, that most people in Quahog do not even know Glenn exists. Then aviation involves, and Glenn resurfaces. Quagmire is described as an ace pilot who can fly anything, and in episodes where he is actually piloting, he demonstrates genuine skill, tactical awareness, and professional competence, maneuvering passenger planes away from fighter jets and handling emergencies with calm precision. He takes his job seriously, and seeing someone act irresponsibly around aircraft instantly angers him, as Peter discovers when he treats the cockpit like a playground. And that anger is not Giggity anger, since Giggity does not get offended by incompetence. That is Glenn protecting something sacred to him, flight. Flight represents escape. Glenn became a pilot to get away from the house where he was assaulted, from the mother who acted inappropriately toward him, revealed in Quagmire's mom, from the father absent during his formative years serving overseas. Flying meant freedom, control, distance from the trauma. As long as Glenn is 30,000 feet in the air, he is safe, because Giggity cannot touch him up there, since Giggity does not know how to fly. Giggity is a 6-year-old trauma response frozen in time, while Glenn is the functional adult who learned a skill and built a career. So when Glenn is piloting, he is fully present, and Giggity goes dormant, because sexual stimuli disappear. The cockpit is Glenn's safe space, the only place he remains in control. But the moment he lands, Giggity takes over again. The relationship with his father reveals the split's origin. But Giggity cannot rewrite anything. It is stuck at age 6, repeating the same pattern forever, which is why the sexuality is compulsive, joyless, and predatory. Giggity does not experience pleasure. Giggity experiences compulsion, and the catchphrase is not celebration, but echolalia, a repetitive verbal tic indicating dissociative state activation. Every time Quagmire says it, he is announcing that Glenn is no longer in control. The show even depicts the switching visually. When Giggity fronts, his pupils dilate, his jaw drops, his body language becomes aggressive and invasive, and when Glenn is present, talking about the Navy, discussing his father, piloting a plane, his eyes focus, his jaw sets, his posture stabilizes. Two different people wearing the same face. And here is the most damning evidence. Quagmire knows something is wrong with him. In Quagmire's Mom, after being arrested, he tries to tell the judge his sexual deviancy is his mother's fault, that being raised by a hypersexual parent warped him, and the judge rejects this, saying he is a grown man who should take responsibility. But Quagmire is not wrong. He is just diagnosing the wrong problem. It is not that his mother made him hypersexual. It is that the trauma from his mother, the abuser, and the absent father caused his personality to splinter, creating an alter that embodies all the damage while Glenn tries desperately to maintain normal functionality. Brian even tells him directly to take responsibility for his own actions and not blame his mother. But Quagmire does not listen, because Glenn is not the one committing most of those actions. Giggity is, and Glenn has no control over Giggity. He is co-conscious, sometimes aware Giggity exists, horrified by what it does, but powerless to stop the switching because the disorder is too entrenched. The only time Glenn successfully integrates is when protecting his sister Brenda from her abusive boyfriend in Screams of Silence. The story of Brenda Q. In that episode, Quagmire displays focused rage, tactical planning, and lethal competence. He is not Giggity chaotic, but Glenn controlled, channeling his military training to execute a justified kill to protect family. For one episode, Glenn was fully fronting and Giggity disappeared because the situation required a competent soldier, not a sex-addicted trauma response. Then the threat was neutralized, Brenda was safe, and Giggity came back, because Giggity always comes back. The catchphrase is not a catchphrase, it is a cry for help. Glenn cannot hear anymore, because Glenn is 30,000 feet up, flying away from himself, trying to escape the monster wearing his face, and he will never land safely, because the moment he touches ground, Giggity is waiting. Subscribe before the next one if this has been worthwhile. Moving on to the Mayor West containment theory. Mayor Adam West does not belong in Quahog. He does not belong in this reality, and somewhere, deep in a classified government facility, there is a file-marked containment protocol. Subject West that explains why a former television actor with documented reality-breaking abilities was strategically relocated to a small Rhode Island town and given mayoral authority as part of an ongoing observation experiment. The theory is not speculation, it is pattern recognition. Adam West exhibits behaviors consistent with meta-awareness. He perceives the narrative structure he is trapped inside. He references the writers directly, and his insane statements are actually accurate descriptions of Family Guy's reality that other characters cannot process. The government did not quarantine him in Quahog to protect citizens from a madman. They quarantined him there to protect reality from someone who can see through it. Start with the most damning evidence. Adam West never ages. He has been mayor since Season 2's Mr. Saturday Night, when he won the election, which is over 20 years of showtime spanning real-world decades. Every other character shows minor aging. Meg and Chris grew from children to teenagers. Stewie developed more complex speech. Even Brian aged from 6 to 10 years old, but Adam West remains frozen. His driver's license in Fox Lady lists him as 61, yet in multiple episodes he references events from the 1960s as though he experienced them recently. He exists outside Quahog's already broken timeline, operating on a completely different temporal axis that does not sync with anyone else's aging. This is not cartoon immortality, this is temporal anchoring. Someone, likely the same government agency that monitors other anomalies in the Family Guy universe, recognized that Adam West exists in a state of quantum superposition between his actor self and his character self, his consciousness unable to be permanently locked into either identity, so they built a containment zone disguised as a mayorship and installed him there, giving him just enough authority that his reality-warping statements become municipal policy instead of observable breaks in the narrative fabric. Watch how other characters react to his statements. In the story on page 1, West tells Meg he spent $100,000 investigating who was stealing his water, which Meg treats as insane fiscal mismanagement, but his actual statement reveals meta-awareness. He is upset that water goes down drains and into the ground because he perceives the show's reality as inconsistent. Where does cartoon water go? It disappears into drawn pipes that lead nowhere. West is correct. Someone is stealing the water, the animators are, drawing water flowing and then deleting it from the scene. West perceives this deletion and interprets it as theft because he is watching the show's construction happen in real time. His solution, to negotiate with a fellow actor to make him stop, reads as nonsense until you realize he is trying to make a deal with someone he recognizes as existing on the same meta level as himself, another real person playing a character. West knows he is in a cartoon, knows the water is not real, and is trying to stop the writers from animating his water disappearing. The statement is not insane. It is the only logical response to perceiving your reality as actively constructed by external forces. In another episode, when protesters gather over a wasteful golden statue, he tries to distract them by jingling keys, a standard animation shortcut for distraction, and when it fails and he gets hit with a brick, he realizes with horror that he is a tomato, which is not random absurdity, but West perceiving his animated form correctly, since in that scene, his character model is drawn with simplified shapes. From a meta perspective, he is a collection of drawn shapes with a face, and he is the only character who looks at himself and sees what he actually is. The light-bright incident in breaking out is hard to do is even more explicit. When pieces go missing from his light-bright spelling Adam West, he has an existential crisis, wondering whether his name is even Adam West, who he is, confronting identity dissolution in real time. From a meta perspective, this is literally true. He is voiced by an actor named Adam West, playing a character named Adam West. He is not a person, he is a name on a script, and when the visual representation of that name becomes incomplete, he perceives his own ontological instability. He is not crazy, he is accurately describing his existential condition as a fictional construct, and the government knows it, which is why he is in Quahog. Consider his origin. West flew into Quahog Town Hall wearing a Batman costume and declared himself mayor, and nobody questioned it. Nobody asked why a 1960s television actor was running for municipal office in Rhode Island. He just appeared fully formed, completely anomalous, and the town accepted him because acceptance was part of the containment protocol. The citizens were briefed, through selective memory adjustment, to treat Mayor West as normal no matter what he does, because flagging his behavior as abnormal would risk him realizing he is under observation. But West already knows. He has always known. In Spies Reminiscent of Us, it is revealed he is a sleeper agent activated by a specific phrase, which is not a joke, but the show revealing his true background. He is an intelligence asset, monitored, programmed, and deployed by government agencies for decades. The trigger phrase is Cold War era, suggesting he has been an asset since the 1960s, right around when he starred in the Batman series. What if that show was not just a show, but the first containment attempt, giving West a fictional identity to inhabit so his meta-awareness would not break consensus reality? It failed. West kept perceiving the boundaries of his fictional role, so they tried something different. Put him in an animated world where reality is already unstable, where characters routinely break the fourth wall, where inconsistency is expected. Quahog is not a real town. It is a containment facility disguised as a cartoon setting, and Adam West is its primary subject. Watch how West interacts with fourth wall breaks. When the Griffins do cutaway gags, they are transported to different locations and times and then snap back. But West does this constantly without the cutaway framing device, casually mentioning being chased by a British nobleman, asserting a medieval feudal custom, which nobody questions because for West, it is happening. He exists in all timelines simultaneously, experiencing past, present, and alternate universes as concurrent realities because his consciousness is not locked to one narrative thread. In Family Guy viewer mail number 1, West leaps into toxic waste to gain superpowers like the Griffins, but instead of powers he gets lymphoma, the show punishing him for trying to break the established rules, since the Griffins can get superpowers as main characters protected by narrative importance, while West, a side character, gets corrected violently for trying to access main character privileges, a reminder that he is not supposed to be here and should stay in his containment zone. Yet West survives the cancer with no explanation or treatment arc, because he cannot die in the traditional sense. He is not bound by Quahog's mortality rules. In one appearance, he shows up as a ghost before the episode revealing his canonical death, a ghost before he is dead, existing in future and past simultaneously because his consciousness operates outside linear time. When West actually dies off-screen, following actor Adam West's real-world death in 2017, the show struggles to process it, having Peter capture his ghost with a proton pack and hold him until they can get a new mayor, the show acknowledging that his death does not follow normal rules, his ghost still active, still functional, still attempting to govern. Even death is just another state for West, not an ending, but a phase shift. The government installed West in Quahog, knowing he would make bizarre statements, and those statements serve a dual purpose. They discredit him, so nobody takes his reality-breaking observations seriously, while simultaneously documenting his meta-awareness for ongoing study. Every absurd mayoral decision, cementing coffins to prevent zombie uprisings, dispatching police to find a fictional movie character, marrying his own hand, is West attempting to impose order on a reality he knows is fictional and inconsistent. Cementing coffins makes sense if you know characters can return from death like Brian did. Searching for a fictional character makes sense if you know fictional characters and real people occupy the same ontological space in Quahog. Marrying his hand makes sense if you have realized relationships in cartoons are arbitrary constructs. West is not insane. He has adapted to living in a drawn world by treating its absurdities as normal and its normalities as suspect. And the citizens never remove him from office except temporarily when Lois runs against him, because someone very high up has mandated that West remain mayor. His position is not democratic, it is assigned. He is not governing Quahog, he is being observed while playing at governance, and the town is his laboratory. The most chilling evidence in Dr. C and the Women is the suggestion that West is fully sane, and his bizarre antics are a smokescreen to throw people off and cover up a darker side. He is performing insanity to hide something else, his complete awareness of the show's constructedness, because if he acted sane, the writers would have to acknowledge his meta-awareness directly. But by acting crazy, he maintains plausible deniability. The audience thinks he is comic relief, the government thinks he is contained, and West is buying time. For what? That is the question the containment protocol was designed to answer. What is Adam West's endgame? What happens if an entity with full narrative awareness decides to stop playing along? The government does not know, which is why he is still in Quahog, why they let him waste taxpayer money on golden frog statues and water theft investigations, every absurd act being data, every bizarre statement logged, as they try to understand the limits of his abilities before he realizes he has them. But West already realized, which is why he keeps testing the boundaries, why he jumps out windows when Meg tries to interview him, demonstrating that consequences do not apply to him consistently, why he survives lymphoma with no treatment, why he becomes a ghost before dying. West is showing the government exactly what he is, an anomaly that should not exist, trapped in a cartoon that can barely contain him. Adam West does not die in Family Guy, he transcends. His death is just him finally breaking free of the Quahog containment zone, ascending to whatever metadimensional space former actors inhabit when they stop performing. The government lost their subject, the show lost its mayor, and somewhere Adam West is still out there, fully aware, watching us watch him, waiting for the next person who looks at a drain and asks where the water really goes. The answer is nowhere, because none of this is real, and Adam West knows. He has always known. That is why they put him in Quahog. If you are enjoying the breakdown, a subscribe helps before we continue. Moving on to the idea that death is not one being, but a franchise. Here is something nobody talks about, but the show keeps proving over and over. Death is not one guy doing one job. Death is a business model, a franchise, a corporate structure for managing mortality across different animated universes. And Family Guy's death is just the regional manager for their particular cartoon reality. Start with the most obvious evidence that nobody seems to notice. Death has two completely different voices. In his first appearance, he was voiced by Norm Macdonald. Then suddenly, starting with Mr. Saturday Night and continuing through every other appearance, Adam Carolla takes over. The official explanation is that Norm Macdonald was busy with another show, but think about what that means in-universe. Death did not just sound different, he was different. Same job title, same black robe, same scythe, but a completely different entity underneath. And it gets weirder when you look under the hood, literally. In Wasted Talent, when Death takes off his hood, he has a bare, clean skull, just bones. But then, in Death Lives, Peter pulls down Death's hood and reveals something totally different. A skull covered with bugs and snakes crawling in and out of the eye sockets, mouth, and ear holes. That is not just an art style change or a continuity error. That is two different beings doing the same job, two different deaths working the same territory at different times. The show tells us directly that death is not the only one in the mortality business. In Mr. Saturday Night, when Brian almost chokes to death on a dinner roll, but Mr. Weed dies instead, Death shows up to collect the body, but he does not come alone. Death's dog appears separately and asks whether someone choked on a dinner roll, and when Brian says he recovered, the dog apologizes and leaves. This is not Death's pet, it is a separate entity with its own jurisdiction. Death handles humans, Death's dog handles animals, and they are co-workers, different branches of the same franchise. This makes sense when you think about how the job works. Death explicitly states in his debut that he is only responsible for human beings, a very specific territorial limitation. He is not Death for everything, he is human Death for this particular animated universe, while Death's dog handles the animal division. They are both Deaths, just serving different client bases, like how there is a McDonald's for burgers and a McCafe for coffee. Same company, different departments. But it goes higher up the corporate ladder. In Grumpy Old Man, Carter falls asleep while driving and crashes, and Death dies in the accident. And when Death dies, Super Death shows up, a larger, more powerful version who tells the regular Death he is being reincarnated as a child in China. Death disappears and immediately reappears, revealing he was born as a girl in China. And then the show just continues with regular Death back at work later. Think about what this proves. Death can die, and when he does, there is a manager who handles his transition. Super Death is not a random powerful being. He is Death's supervisor, the regional boss, the corporate overseer, who manages what happens when one of the franchise deaths goes offline, and the fact that Death gets reincarnated and comes back to work later means this is not a permanent position, but a job you cycle through. This is why Death is so bad at his job. He is not some ancient cosmic force. He is a guy who took a franchise position managing mortality for one specific cartoon universe. In his debut, Death sprains his ankle chasing Peter and has to stay at the Griffin house for days recovering, and during that time, nobody can die. Humanity becomes immortal, and people cannot even feel pain. This is not because he is the concept of mortality itself, it is because he is the only Death assigned to Family Guy's universe right now, the sole franchisee, and when he goes offline, the service stops completely. No backup, no coverage, just one guy managing all human deaths in Quahog and beyond. And Death hates his job. He lives with his mother and complains about how hard it is to interact with women because he keeps accidentally killing them. He mentions taking part in movies he was not proud of. He is a mama's boy teenager who never grew up emotionally, which is not what you would expect from the eternal embodiment of Death, but exactly what you would expect from someone who took a job they are not qualified for and is just trying to get through each shift. Death also has powers that make no sense for a cosmic entity, but perfect sense for a franchise employee with specific contractual abilities. He can time travel. In Meet the Quagmires, he grants Peter's wish to go back to 1984 for one night, and Peter can physically interact with the past and change the timeline, which Death does casually, like part of his standard service package. In Death Lives, he takes Peter on a mental time travel journey through his memories. These are not powers you would expect Death to have, but if he is a franchise manager assigned to maintain continuity in a sitcom universe, time travel makes sense. He is not just managing who dies when, he is managing the narrative, making sure the show's continuity holds together. And here is the really wild part. Death cannot consistently kill people by touching them. In I Take Thee Quagmire, anyone who touches Death's bones dies instantly, but in his debut, Stewie massages Death's sprained ankle and does not die, because Death is out of commission, and Death touches Peter multiple times throughout various episodes with no effect. Sometimes it is explained as Peter having a near-death experience, so the rules do not apply, but other times Peter is perfectly healthy, and Death just cannot kill him. This is not a plot hole. It is evidence that Death's powers are limited and conditional. He does not have omnipotent control over mortality. He has a job with rules he has to follow, and those rules are inconsistent because they are not natural laws, but corporate policies, franchise guidelines. You can kill people by touching them, except when the narrative needs them alive. You can time travel, but only when the plot requires it. You manage human deaths, but not animal deaths. These are the terms of Death's employment contract with whatever higher power runs the multiverse franchise system. The show proves this franchise model exists beyond just Family Guy. In an episode where Death tells Cleveland that the Cleveland show got canceled and brings Peter and Cleveland to heaven to meet God, Death has access to multiple animated universes. He knows about show cancellations and can travel between different sitcom realities, so he is not bound to just Family Guy's universe, but part of a larger network of Deaths managing different shows. And according to behind-the-scenes information, Death was originally cast to play Emperor Palpatine in the Star Wars parodies, but the staff realized Carter was more suited to the role and retroactively replaced Death with Carter in Something, 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 Dark Side for continuity's sake. Death can be replaced, recast, not just his voice actor, but his actual role within the narrative given to someone else if it serves the story better, because Death is not a fundamental force, but a character employee who can be swapped out. Think about what all of this means. Norm Macdonald's death and Adam Carolla's death are not the same being with a different voice. They are two different Deaths who held the same franchise position at different times. The Bear Skull, Death, and the Bugs and Snakes skull death, are not continuity errors, they are different deaths working the same territory. Death's dog is not a pet, he is the animal franchise manager. Super Death is not a more powerful version of Death, he is corporate management overseeing regional death franchises. And when Death dies and gets reincarnated, he is cycling out of the position while someone new eventually takes over. Family Guy's Death is a middle manager who hates his job, lives with his mother, has inconsistent powers, gets injured by soccer balls and sprained ankles, makes mistakes constantly, and can be replaced when necessary. He is not the Grim Reaper. He is a guy in a Grim Reaper costume running a mortality franchise for one specific cartoon universe. And the scariest part is that every other sitcom probably has their own death franchise. The Simpsons has one, South Park has one, American Dad has one. Each shows death operating independently with their own rules and limitations based on what their narrative universe requires. Death is not one being. Death is a company, a multi-universal corporation that assigns individual deaths to manage mortality for different fictional realities, and Family Guy's Death is just the guy who got assigned to Quahog. He shows up when humans die, brings his co-worker's dog when animals die, reports to Super Death when he screws up, follows inconsistent company policies about who he can and cannot kill, uses his contractually granted time travel abilities to fix narrative problems, and gets reincarnated when his franchise term expires. He is not eternal, not omnipotent, not even particularly competent. He is a franchise employee, and somewhere out there, in whatever metadimensional corporate headquarters manages mortality across all animated universes, there is a whole office building full of deaths getting assigned to different shows, attending training on how to properly collect souls, filing paperwork with Super Death about timeline inconsistencies, and complaining about difficult clients like Peter Griffin, who refuse to die when they are supposed to. When Norm Macdonald's Death's contract ended and Adam Carolla's death took over, nobody in Quahog even noticed the difference, because at the end of the day, death is just a job, and as long as someone is wearing the robe and carrying the scythe, the franchise keeps running. Welcome to Death Incorporated, now serving every animated universe, franchises available, inquire within. Do subscribe before the next theory if you are enjoying this. Moving on to the Griffin gene mutation theory. Nobody in Quahog looks normal, but the Griffins are on another level. Peter's chin has a cleft so deep you could hide a baseball in it. Meg's eyes are so big they make anime characters jealous. And Chris looks like someone copy-pasted Peter's face onto a teenage body and called it a day. These are not just design choices, they are symptoms, evidence of something wrong at the genetic level. And the smoking gun is not hidden. It is right there in Quahog Harbor, dumping poison into the water every single day. The Griffin family is not just weird-looking, they are mutants, genetic anomalies created by decades of toxic runoff from the Quahog oil refinery. And Dr. Hartman knows, he has always known, because he is not their doctor, he is their monitor, watching, documenting, making sure the experiment does not get out of control. Start with the physical evidence. Peter is 6 feet tall and weighs 270 pounds, his face so round it has become one with his neck, no separation, just one continuous mass of flesh, and his chin has a cleft so large and deep that it dominates his entire facial structure. This is not normal human anatomy, this is a deformity, a mutation in bone and tissue development. But Peter is not alone. Chris was born so large that a newspaper called him an elephant child, and he inherited Peter's nose, mouth, and chin exactly, not similar, exact, like someone photocopied Peter's DNA and printed it onto Chris with no variation. That is not how genetics normally works. Children take traits from both parents with natural variation, but Chris is Peter, just younger, the same overweight body, the same features, the same massive chin, like watching genetic replication fail to properly mix DNA from both parents. And then there is Meg, who has her father's hair and glasses, but whose eyes are described as huge, abnormally large, so big they stand out as her defining characteristic. These are not just big anime eyes for artistic style. Within the show's universe, her eyes are notably enormous compared to everyone else, a mutation in ocular development, eyes that grew larger than they should have because something in her genetic code got corrupted. The show tells us exactly where these mutations come from. In It Takes a Village Idiot and I Married One, the family goes swimming in Lake Quahog and discovers that the Quahog oil refinery is dumping toxic waste directly into the lake. They flee, but too late. Their hair falls out, all of them, immediately. The waste so concentrated, it caused instant physical deformity. Mayor Adam West admits on the record that he sanctioned the dumping in exchange for free hair oil. This is confirmed. The refinery, led by a CEO, has been pumping industrial waste into Lake Quahog for years, and when Lois becomes mayor and cleans up the lake, the CEO bribes her with an expensive coat to let them resume dumping, and the waste flows again, and the show explicitly states the pollution causes deformities. Jake Tucker is the proof of concept. The kid with the upside-down face jumps into the contaminated lake and surfaces with his face fixed, the toxic waste having normalized his deformity, rearranging his facial structure back to human standard. This proves the chemicals in Lake Quahog do not just poison, they alter, they mutate, they change genetic expression and physical development on contact. And Lake Quahog is not the only source. In Brian the Closer, when Quagmire buys a condo, a neighbor warns him the harbor is poisoned, Quahog Harbor being the major port of entry, the water supply that connects to everything, where industrial waste has been dumped for decades. Peter was born in Quahog, Lois was born in Quahog, and their entire lives have been spent near water contaminated with industrial chemicals. But it gets worse. In a Family Guy viewer mail segment, Super Griffins shows what happens when the Griffins are exposed to concentrated toxic waste. A truck carrying nuclear waste crashes in front of the house. The entire family gets drenched, and every one of them develops mutations. Peter can shapeshift, Lois gains superhuman strength, Stewie's cranium doubles in size, Brian moves at superhuman speeds, Chris develops pyrokinesis, and even Meg's fingernails grow and shrink on command. The show is telling us the Griffin family's DNA is reactive to toxic waste. They do not just get sick, they mutate, their genes responding to chemical exposure by expressing abnormal traits. And when Mayor West tries to replicate the experiment by rolling around in radioactive waste himself, he gets lymphoma, a normal human response, but not the Griffins, who mutate because their DNA is already so corrupted by years of environmental exposure that toxic waste does not kill them, it just makes them more mutated. Now consider Peter's brain. In Petarded, Peter takes an IQ test, showing his IQ is approximately 70, just below the threshold for mental disability, and the doctor shows him a graph with sections, placing Peter's name in the disabled section, with an even lower category below it. Peter is functioning at a level that technically qualifies as intellectually disabled, confirmed by a professor from the State Office of Mental Health. This is not a joke that gets walked back, it is established canon. Peter's brain does not work right, and neither does Chris's. The show tells us Chris exhibits stupidity and dim-wittedness as he grows older. His parents had him tested. The tests showed no known mental disorders, meaning his behavior is just his own stupidity, and his stupidity was thought to be a genetic trait passed down by Peter, but did not affect Meg and Stewie. That is not how genetics works. If stupidity were a simple inherited trait from Peter, it would affect all the children, but it only affects the male children, Peter and Chris, both showing severe cognitive impairment, both with the same physical deformities, the same massive chins, the same obesity. This is not normal inheritance, this is genetic corruption, passing from father to son through the Y chromosome, a mutation that specifically affects male development. And where does this mutation come from? The environment, decades of toxic waste exposure in Quahog, the oil refinery dumping chemicals into the lake, the poisoned harbor, the radioactive waste that gives the griffins superpowers instead of cancer. All of it points to one conclusion. The griffins have been exposed to so much environmental poison for so long that their DNA has mutated, and those mutations are being passed to their children. Now consider Dr. Hartman, because Hartman knows something is wrong with the griffins. He has been their doctor for years, sees them constantly, runs tests, performs exams, and never does anything properly. He is described as highly incompetent, rated the worst doctor in the hospital in Ratings Guy. He uses misleading words the griffins presume to be diagnosis, but which turn out to be nothing, telling them they are medically fine. Think about that pattern. Hartman constantly tells the griffins they are fine when they are clearly not, uses deliberately misleading language, performs exams wrong, loses his medical license temporarily. It is revealed he never graduated high school, that he has dyslexia, that he is an alcoholic who attends meetings with Peter. This is not a competent doctor making mistakes. This is someone who is not supposed to be healing them. He is supposed to be watching them. And here is the smoking gun. In New Kidney in Town, Hartman comments about creating a man-sized hostile chicken, glossed over during Peter's concern about a kidney transplant. Hartman is conducting experiments, creating mutations, and the show glosses over it. Nobody questions it, nobody investigates, because in Quahog, genetic experimentation is normal, part of the background radiation of a town built on toxic waste. Hartman is not incompetent. He is pretending to be incompetent, because his real job is not to cure the griffins, but to monitor them, to document their mutations, to see how far the genetic corruption can go before it becomes dangerous. That is why he never properly treats them, why he always tells them they are fine, because treating them would interfere with the data, and the data is what matters. Think about how many times the griffins should have died. Peter has survived explosions, falls, shootings, car crashes, and every form of physical trauma imaginable. In Petarded, after discovering he is disabled, he survives nearly drowning in a bowl of soup, even with water wings on. A normal human would have died dozens of times over, but he does not die. He regenerates, he heals, his mutated physiology keeping him alive through trauma that would kill anyone else. The same goes for the whole family. Chris survives being set on fire multiple times, Meg survives brutal physical abuse, Stewie survives building weapons that blow up in his face, Brian survives being hit by cars. The entire family has a healing factor that should not exist in normal humans, and Hartman knows because he has seen their medical records, seen them survive things that should have killed them, and he documents it because that is his job. The Quahog oil refinery has been dumping toxic waste into Lake Quahog for decades. The harbor is poisoned, the water supply is contaminated. The entire town has been living in an environmental disaster zone since before Peter was born. His mother tried to abort him in Mexico because even she knew something was wrong with the pregnancy. Peter was born prematurely at 6 months because his body was already mutating in the womb, developing too quickly, too abnormally. Lois tried to abort Chris too, drinking and smoking heavily during the pregnancy to force a miscarriage. But Chris survived, just like Peter survived his attempted abortion, because Griffin genes do not respond to normal biological stressors. They adapt, they mutate, they survive. And Stewie, according to the candidate, was an unplanned pregnancy from a traumatic event. Yet even with that trauma, he developed genius-level intelligence, an IQ estimated between 250 and 300, so high it cannot be properly measured. That is not normal genetic expression, that is a mutation. The same toxic waste that made Peter stupid made Stewie brilliant. Both extremes of human intelligence in the same family, both caused by genetic corruption. Hartman sees all of this. He knows Peter is intellectually disabled, that Chris is developmentally impaired, that their physical deformities are not normal, that their healing factors should not exist, that they survive things that would kill normal humans, and he does nothing because his job is not to help them, but to watch what happens when human beings are exposed to decades of environmental toxins. The Griffins are not his patients, they are his subjects. The evidence is overwhelming. The refinery dumps toxic waste into the lake. The harbor is poisoned. The Griffins have severe physical deformities. Peter and Chris have documented intellectual disabilities. The family survives fatal trauma. They develop superpowers when exposed to concentrated toxic waste. Their genes are reactive to chemical contamination in ways normal human DNA is not. And Hartman, their doctor, is incompetent by design because he is not treating them, he is monitoring them. The Griffins are not just weird-looking cartoon characters, they are mutants, genetic experiments created by environmental disaster. Their massive chins, abnormal eyes, intellectual disabilities, and impossible survival rates all tracing back to one source: toxic waste in Quahog's water supply, decades of industrial pollution mutating the genetic code of everyone who lives there. And Dr. Hartman is not a bad doctor. He is a good scientist, documenting the long-term effects of toxic exposure on human populations, making sure the data keeps flowing even as the subjects' bodies break down. Welcome to Quahog, Rhode Island, population mutants, and Dr. Hartman is taking notes. Before we move on, subscribe if this is worth your while. Moving on to the Griffin House is a portal theory. Houses do not work the way the Griffin House works. When fire destroys the interior in a very special Family Guy freakin' Christmas, burning everything down to the studs, the house is back to normal by the next episode. Not repaired, not rebuilt, reset. Same green couch, same yellow kitchen walls, same exact layout, like someone hit undo on reality itself. And it is not just the Griffin House. Every house on Spooner Street operates under rules that do not apply to normal residential architecture. Rooms appear and disappear. Layouts change between episodes. Features manifest when needed and vanish when they are not. The bathroom in Peter and Lois's bedroom switches sides depending on the episode. These are not continuity errors. They are symptoms of something much stranger. The houses on Spooner Street are not houses. They are containment pods, government-issued reality anchors designed to host unstable anomalies that would otherwise tear holes in the fabric of normal space. And the residents are not neighbors. They are subjects, test cases, living experiments in what happens when you try to contain the impossible inside four walls and pretend it is normal. Start with the smoking gun. In E Peterbus Unum, Peter applies for a permit to install a swimming pool, and the city discovers something impossible. The Griffin House at 31 Spooner Street does not appear on any maps of the street or city. Not outdated maps, not incomplete maps, no maps. The house is physically there, people can see it, mail gets delivered to it. But cartographically, officially, according to every municipal record, 31 Spooner Street does not exist. The house has been there for years. Peter and Lois have lived there throughout the series. They pay utilities and get mail, and the city knows they exist because they file taxes and get audited, but their address is not on any official map. That is not a bureaucratic oversight. That is deliberate erasure. Someone went through every map, every zoning document, every city record, and removed 31 Spooner Street from existence. And when Peter discovers this, the United States government recognizes his house as the independent nation of Pretoria, not as a joke, not as a technicality. They laugh off, they militarize the border, cut utilities, impose sanctions, and fire missiles at his property, the full force of the US military, responding to one man declaring his house a country, treating it as a legitimate geopolitical threat. Why? Because the government knows what that house really is, and what happens if Peter is allowed to exist outside their jurisdiction. The house was not missing from the maps by accident. It was removed because it cannot be on maps, because maps are attempts to create stable representations of physical space, and 31 Spooner Street does not occupy stable physical space. The evidence is everywhere once you start looking. In Petergeist, the house was built over a Native American burial ground, and it becomes haunted after Peter digs up the bones. But hauntings do not work like that in normal reality. Ghosts do not manifest because you disturb bones, but in a house that exists as a liminal space between realities, where the boundaries between living and dead are paper thin, the burial ground is not the cause of the haunting. It is proof the house was deliberately built on unstable ground, on purpose, because you need unstable ground to anchor a containment portal. And the house does not just change configuration, it resets after catastrophic damage. In a very special Family Guy, Freakin' Christmas, an ember causes the entire interior to catch fire. Brian suffers burns, the furniture is destroyed, the walls are burned, and the interior of the house is gone. Next episode, perfect condition, same furniture, same wall decorations, same carpet. It was not repaired, it was reset, like a video game respawning assets after you die. The house has a default configuration encoded into its structure, and when damage exceeds a certain threshold, it reverts to factory settings. But the reset is not perfect. Things bleed through. The living room carpet was yellow in seasons 1 to 3. Then, in season 4, it became green. And when Brian asks why the carpet changed color, Peter explains he hated the yellow carpet and burned it. But that is not what happened. The house reset between production runs, and the new default configuration had a green carpet. And Peter's explanation is a retroactive justification his mind created to make sense of the change, because the residents cannot consciously acknowledge what they are. Their brains smooth over the inconsistencies, make up explanations, rationalize the impossible. The same thing happens with rooms that appear once and never again. In Mr. Saturday Night, there is a downstairs bathroom that does not match the layout and never appears again. In the Christmas episode, there is a functional fireplace that only exists that once. These are not animation mistakes. They are the house generating temporary spaces as needed, manifesting rooms from the underlying template when the narrative requires them, then collapsing them back into non-existence. And it is not just the Griffin house. Every house on Spooner Street operates this way. Before Joe Swanson moved into 33 Spooner Street, an unnamed neighbor lived there who electrocuted himself in the bathtub using Peter's toaster. He died, the house reset, and Joe moved in. Same house, new configuration, new resident. And Joe is the most obvious anomaly on the entire street. He is paralyzed from the waist down, confined to a wheelchair, cannot walk, except that he has immense strength and durability, performing feats impossible even for able-bodied Olympic athletes. In one episode, he uses a cable to arrive at a cliff before 3 other people while in his wheelchair, then climbs a tree with his legs and catches all 3, the legs that are paralyzed, that do not work. Joe's legs have been restored and re-paralyzed at least 5 separate times through completely different mechanisms. He regains movement briefly in the Christmas episode, but is re-paralyzed. He gets experimental surgery and walks again in Believe It or Not. Joe's walking on air, but then re-paralyzes himself. His spine gets broken skiing. Peter and Joe swap spines. Hartman leaves a phone in Joe's back, making him quadriplegic. This is not cartoon logic. This is a body that exists in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Joe is both paralyzed and not paralyzed depending on which version of reality is currently active. His wheelchair and anchor point keeping him tethered to one configuration while his legs phase in and out of functionality because his body is too unstable for the containment to fully hold. And his origin story changes. First, he says he slipped off a roof chasing the Grinch. Then, he reveals that was a lie, and he was actually shot by a drug dealer. Two completely different stories, two completely different timelines, because Joe exists in a state of narrative superposition, multiple pasts bleeding through the containment. Then, there is Cleveland at 30 Spooner Street, who, when the Cleveland show was cancelled, just moved back to the same house with his new family, as if the show never happened. And before that, two government agents rented the house from Loretta in spies reminiscent of Us, working undercover. Because of course there are government agents embedded on Spooner Street. Someone has to watch the subjects. And Quagmire at 29 Spooner Street, a sex addict with impossible stamina who never ages and never suffers consequences. Herbert at 35 Spooner Street, impossibly old, surviving for decades beyond a normal human lifespan. Every resident of Spooner Street is anomalous, every single one. Peter with his IQ of 70 and his ability to survive fatal injuries, Joe with his quantum legs, Cleveland with his unshakable calm, Quagmire with his superhuman drive, Herbert with his impossible age. They are not neighbors who happen to be weird. They are contained anomalies housed in reality-bending structures designed to keep them from destabilizing the rest of the world. And the houses maintain the illusion, looking normal from the outside. White siding, red door, suburban architecture. But inside they are bigger than they should be, with basements that connect to impossible spaces, attics with panic rooms, secret weapon rooms, rooms that appear and disappear, spaces that reconfigure based on need. Because these are not houses, they are pocket dimensions, carefully calibrated bubbles of altered reality where the rules can bend just enough to contain the residents without the whole structure collapsing. That is why the houses reset after destruction, why rooms move, why the layouts are inconsistent, why 31 Spooner Street was not on any maps, because these structures exist slightly out of phase with normal reality. They are anchored to Spooner Street, but not part of Spooner Street the way a normal house would be, inserted into the space, overlaid on top of regular geography, accessible but separate. And when Peter declared Pretoria an independent nation, he was accidentally correct. His house literally is not part of the United States. It is a contained space that exists within US borders, but not as part of them. The government's aggressive response was not about ego, it was about panic, because if Peter figured out what his house really was, if he started testing the boundaries of the containment, the whole structure could collapse, the portal could destabilize, the anomaly could escape. That is why they militarized so fast, why they fired missiles, not to kill Peter, but to scare him back into the containment, to make him think he had lost, to convince him to voluntarily re-annex his property back into the United States, because they cannot force him. The containment only works if the subjects believe it is real. If Peter truly understood that his house exists outside normal space-time, the illusion would shatter, and they would lose containment on every anomaly on Spooner Street simultaneously. The houses are not protecting the residents, they are protecting us from them. Peter with his invincible body and his reality-warping stupidity, Joe with his quantum state paralysis and superhuman strength, Quagmire with his bottomless libido, Cleveland with his unshakable calm, Herbert with his immortality, all of them too unstable, too impossible, too dangerous to exist in normal space. So the government built special houses, containment pods disguised as suburban homes, reality anchors that let the anomalies think they are living normal lives while actually existing in carefully controlled pocket dimensions. And when damage exceeds parameters, the houses reset, return to default configuration, erase the evidence, maintain the illusion, because the illusion is the containment. Break the illusion and you break the seal, and Spooner Street stops being a quiet neighborhood in Quahog and starts being ground zero for a reality collapse. The Griffin House is not haunted, not cursed, not unlucky. It is a portal, a containment facility, a pocket dimension disguised as a two-story colonial. And Peter, Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland are not neighbors. They are inmates living in houses that rebuild themselves, surrounded by walls that remember, trapped in a reality that resets every time they get too close to the truth, and nobody notices, because that is how good the containment is. Subscribe before we continue if this is landing for you. Moving on, we have Lois's unaging curse. Lois Griffin does not age. Everyone knows it, but nobody says it. Flashbacks place her as an 18-year-old in 1984. Other episodes show her as a college student in the 1990s. She gives birth to Meg in the early 2000s, and now, over 20 years of real-world time later, she is still 43. Same face, same body, same voice, frozen in time while the world moves forward around her. The show calls it a floating timeline, a narrative convenience where characters stay the same age forever, so the series can run indefinitely. But that is the cover story, the explanation they give you, so you do not ask questions. Because if you look at the pattern, at what Lois has become versus what she was, you see something far darker. Lois Griffin made a deal, not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. She bargained with supernatural forces to preserve her youth, and the price was her soul, her morality, her humanity. Everything that made her the caring mother and loyal wife is being slowly consumed, drained away year by year, replaced with something cold, something cruel, something that wears her face but is not her anymore. And the evidence is written in her timeline, in her transformations, in the bodies she has left behind. Start with what we know. Lois was born on June 3rd. The year changes depending on which episode you watch, so already the timeline is fractured. Already reality cannot maintain a consistent record of when she entered the world, because she should not still be here, not looking like this, not at this age. In Meet the Quagmires, we see her at 18 in 1984. A teenager, beautiful, innocent, full of life, and Peter travels back and sees her at the country club, jumping into the pool, carefree. That is over 40 years ago. If she was 18 in 1984, she should be approaching 60 now. But she is not, she is 43, stated multiple times throughout the series. 43, despite appearing in timelines that should make her approaching 60. And it is not just one flashback. Peter and Lois's wedding shows them in the 1990s as young adults, Lois depicted as a 20-something in peak 90s aesthetics. That is 30 years ago. If she was 25 in 1995, she should be 55 now. But she is 43, always 43. Like the number is locked in place. Like time moves around her, but not through her. And then there is her past. Her wild past. The one she never talks about unless forced. Lois had relationships with famous 1980s rock stars, Gene Simmons of Kiss among them, all encounters that should place her as a teenager or young adult in that era. She was a groupie, a party girl living the rock and roll lifestyle while bands like Kiss were at their peak. Gene Simmons, the demon bassist, the performer who wore devil makeup and spit blood on stage, whose entire persona was built around occult imagery and supernatural theatrics. And Lois did not just date him, she got close to him, close enough that decades later, Peter still references it. What if it was not just Gene Simmons the person she encountered? What if, through him, through that connection to theatrical darkness, she touched something real? What if the devil makeup was not just makeup? What if Lois Pewterschmidt, young and beautiful, and terrified of aging like every other woman in her wealthy social circle, made contact with forces that offered her a deal? Stay young forever, never age, never lose your looks, never become the dried-up society matron like your mother. Stay 25 forever, and the cost is nothing you will miss. Just your conscience, your empathy, your ability to feel guilt, taken slowly, so slowly you will not even notice. She took the deal. Of course she took the deal. She was young, beautiful, surrounded by aging women in her parents' social circle who would do anything to look young again. She watched her mother grow older while her father stayed powerful, and she knew what happened to women who aged in that world. They became invisible, irrelevant, replaced. So she said yes, and the clock stopped. The years passed, but Lois stayed the same, frozen at the peak of her beauty forever. But the price came due, slowly at first, then faster, then all at once. For the first 7 seasons of Family Guy, Lois was genuinely good, patient, loving, the moral center of the family, putting up with Peter's stupidity with grace, caring for her children, trying to do the right thing, the anchor, the voice of reason. Then, season 8 happened, and everything changed. Suddenly, Lois was not patient anymore. She was cruel, abusive, cold. Her relationship with Meg became actively hostile, and she became sexually promiscuous, cheating on Peter repeatedly with no remorse. She became violent. In Undergrounded, a flashback reveals she killed a waitress during her honeymoon to prove her love for Peter, and in another episode, she casually admits to killing a jaywalker, telling comatose Chris that every mother has killed someone. She became abusive, strangling Chris when he compared her to Madonna, using her strength as a bodybuilder to terrorize her family, kidnapping people when she did not get an award at Starbucks, refusing to take responsibility for any of it. Her voice even changed, becoming higher-pitched, more nasal, more grating, and she started pronouncing Peter's name wrong, like something was wrong with her vocal cords, like the body was not maintaining itself properly anymore, like the deal was breaking down at the edges, and the seams were starting to show. This is not character development. This is decay. This is what happens when you sell your humanity for eternal youth. The body stays young, but the soul rots, year by year, season by season, the goodness draining out, the empathy dying, the capacity for love withering, until what is left is something that looks like Lois Griffin, but is not anymore. And here is the proof that it is supernatural. Nobody else in the show changed like this. Peter was always an idiot, Brian was always pretentious, Stewie was always violent, Meg was always bullied. Their personalities stayed consistent, exaggerated over time, yes, but fundamentally the same. But Lois transformed from nurturing mother to child abuser, from faithful wife to serial cheater, from moral compass to murderer. That is not Flanderization, that is corruption, a soul being consumed by darkness, the price of the deal coming due, and she knows. Deep down, she knows. In Undergrounded, she speaks Klingon because the women at her nail salon are Klingons, and she is afraid they are talking about her. Paranoia, fear, the knowledge that people can see something is wrong with her. In her conversation with comatose Chris, she admits she is terrified her past will catch up with her, that she wants more but cannot have it, that she is trapped because she is trapped. The deal is permanent. She stays 43 forever, stays beautiful forever, but the cost keeps accumulating. Every year she does not age, another piece of her humanity dies, another memory of kindness fades, another line she is willing to cross gets moved, until there is nothing left but the shell, the body, the face, walking around wearing Lois's appearance, but containing something else entirely. And Satan appears in Family Guy multiple times. In A Picture's Worth $1,000, he tries to claim Peter's soul, but discovers Peter already sold it twice, once for concert tickets, once for half a candy bar. Satan is real in this universe. He makes deals, he collects souls, he operates according to rules and contracts. Lois never mentions selling her soul, but she never had to, because the evidence is in her body, in her timeline, in her transformation. She is living proof that deals with darkness are real, that eternal youth comes at a price, that you can bargain with forces beyond human understanding if you are desperate enough, vain enough, terrified enough of aging. She made the deal in the 1980s, probably 1985 or 1986. Terrified of becoming her mother, desperate to stay young, Gene Simmons's demonic theatrics. The conduit, the doorway, and through it, she reached something old that offered her exactly what she wanted, and she took it. She stayed 25, then 30, then 43, the number locking in place around 1995 and never moving again. The show started in 1999 and she was 43. Decades later, she is still 43. Same face, same body, frozen, preserved, unchanging. But inside she is hollowing out, the light dying, the warmth fading, the person who loved her family being consumed by the thing that wears her face. And eventually, even the show noticed. Critics pointed it out, fans demanded change, and in later seasons, Lois started redeeming herself, started acting kind again, started being the person she used to be, because the deal has an end point. Every contract does, and maybe, just maybe, Lois is running out of time. Maybe that redemption is not character growth, but desperation, a last-ditch attempt to reclaim her humanity before the final payment comes due. Stewie left a time bomb for her that will go off on her 50th birthday, stated explicitly in Lethal Weapons, 50 being the age she will never reach, the age the deal prevents her from seeing, because if she makes it to 50, the contract expires and she gets to keep her youth and her soul. But she will not make it, she cannot, because she is 43 and has been 43 for decades, and she will be 43 forever, because that is the deal, that is the curse, that is the price of eternal youth in a world where devils are real and contracts are binding. Lois Griffin does not age because she cannot age. She sold that ability away, traded linear time for frozen youth, and now she is trapped, forever 43, forever young, forever losing pieces of her soul, until one day there will be nothing left, just the body, just the face, just the voice saying Peter's name in that hollow, wrong way, and the thing inside will be complete, the transformation finished, the deal fulfilled. Lois Griffin will still be 43, still beautiful, still perfect, still dead inside, because eternal youth has a price, and Lois is paying it, one missing piece of humanity at a time. Take a moment to subscribe before we go on. Moving on to the laugh track entity, the voices of higher beings watching from above. Here is something nobody talks about, something hiding in plain sight, something that explains everything weird about the Griffin family's existence. Family Guy does not have a traditional laugh track. Most animated shows do not. The Simpsons never had one. South Park never had one. But sometimes, just sometimes, you hear it. Studio audience laughter, applause, reactions from people who should not be there. And the characters know, they hear it too. They acknowledge it, they react to it, because those laughs are not editing mistakes or post-production additions. They are real. They are the actual voices of higher dimensional beings watching the Griffin universe the way we watch a sitcom, and the Griffins are starting to figure it out. The evidence is everywhere. The most blatant example, in one episode, Peter literally installs a live studio audience in the middle of Spooner Street, bleachers full of people right there on the road, and when he starts making a joke to Brian, he has to stop, has to wait, because the audience will not stop laughing. He cannot continue the sentence until they finish. Peter acknowledges their presence, hears them, waits for them. These are not invisible observers. They are entities that exist in his reality, beings whose laughter creates actual sound in his world. But it gets weirder, because Family Guy mocked other shows for using laugh tracks, with a specific gag about a live studio ostrich appearing on terrible sitcoms, the joke being that bad shows need laugh tracks to tell audiences when something is funny. Family Guy treated it like it was fake, artificial, pathetic, so why do they have one sometimes? Unless what the Griffins experience is not a production choice, but a metaphysical reality. The meta-awareness is canon. In the episode Inside Family Guy, the truth gets revealed. The entire episode is a behind-the-scenes look at the show. We learn that Family Guy is a show within their universe, that the Griffins are actors playing themselves, that they have contracts, a studio, and film episodes, aware they are on television. Lois wears a wig, her orange hair not real. Peter is a diva who gets fired every Monday and comes crawling back by Friday. The writers create fake scripts where Peter dies just to manipulate him. The whole family knows they are performing for someone. But who? Who is watching the show within their show? The answer is us, higher dimensional beings, entities from outside their reality, watchers from a plane of existence they cannot fully comprehend. We are not just viewers of Family Guy the TV show, we are higher beings observing the Griffin universe directly. And when we laugh at their suffering, when we react to their pain and humiliation and constant disasters, they hear us, like distant thunder, like voices from the sky, like the laugh track. They break the fourth wall constantly. Peter looks directly at the camera and talks to us all the time, winks at the screen, makes jokes about awards, tells us that moments like this are why he married Lois, then tells us to stop watching because he is about to have sex. He knows we are there. Stewie does it too, singing that Fox will never let them die, then looking at the camera and saying please. He is not talking to Peter or Brian. He is talking to entities that control whether his universe continues existing, beings who make decisions about cancellation and renewal, gods from another dimension who hold his reality in their hands. Quagmire admits, when discussing restaurants, that they make up fake names instead of using real brands because they are on television, openly acknowledging being watched, knowing there are legal entities from another plane that can punish them. In one episode, Peter references TV Guide, shows Lois the listing for their show, points out that this week's episode is supposed to be about him getting into trouble at the rodeo. He knows the episode exists, knows it has a title, knows it was planned by entities outside his control. The multiverse proves higher dimensions exist. Road to the Multiverse establishes that infinite parallel universes exist alongside the main Family Guy reality. Stewie builds a remote that lets him and Brian jump between dimensions, visiting universes of Disney-style animation, of humans ruled by dogs, of stop-motion figures. And here is the key. They visit the real universe, the live-action universe, where Brian and Stewie appear as actual flesh and blood beings, existing in our world for a few seconds, breaching the dimensional barrier, crossing from their animated reality into the higher plane where we exist. Stewie explains the multiverse theory, that there are an infinite number of universes coexisting with theirs on parallel planes, each reality different. If infinite universes exist, and the Griffins can visit the real universe where everything is live action, then higher dimensional beings can obviously observe their universe from outside. The barrier goes both ways, and when millions of higher beings watch their suffering simultaneously, they experience it as the laugh track, as audience reactions, as the voices of gods commenting on their pain. The sound effects are documented. According to sound effects databases, Family Guy specifically used studio audience laughter and applause in specific episodes, not as background noise, not as diegetic sound from a TV in the scene, but as actual audience reactions to events happening in the Griffin universe. Why would an animated show without a live studio audience include these sounds? Because they are not production choices, they are documentary evidence, capturing something the characters experience, the voices of beings watching from outside their dimensional plane. The cutaways reveal the truth. In Back to the Pilot, Brian and Stewie time travel to the very first episode and discover that during cutaway gags, the Griffin family just stands there, frozen, motionless, waiting in the kitchen while the cutaway plays out. A modern cutaway shows the family relaxed, Peter checking his phone, just hanging out, waiting for the cutaway to end so they can continue their scripted lives. They are aware of the cutaways, They know when their reality pauses so higher beings can watch a tangential joke. They experience time differently than we do, their suffering interrupted by cosmic intermissions they cannot control. Peter's self-awareness is undeniable. He acknowledges the audience constantly, talks about ratings, mentions the writers, complains about Fox, knows he exists inside a structure controlled by beings from another plane. In one episode, he tries to tell a joke, but the laugh track will not stop laughing, and he literally has to wait for them to finish before he can continue speaking. This is not editing. This is Peter experiencing temporal distortion caused by higher beings reacting to his actions. At the end of episodes, he looks at the camera and gives a thumbs up. And who is he giving it to? Us, the watchers, the higher dimensional entities who just observed his suffering for 22 minutes. He acknowledges our presence, knows we watched, says goodbye to beings he cannot fully see, but knows are there. The 300th episode, Inside Family Guy, is basically a confession. The show admits everything, that Peter is an actor aware he is performing, that the family knows they are on television, referencing past episodes, discussing contracts, worrying about cancellation, talking about maintaining ratings. The episode reveals that Family Guy is a live-action sitcom inside their universe. The characters we see as cartoons actually real people wearing makeup and costumes performing for an audience. But who is watching that show? Other higher beings, entities from dimensions even further up the chain. It is observed all the way up, the Griffins performing for an audience. That audience observed by another audience. That audience observed by us, and maybe we are being observed too. Maybe our reality is just another layer in an infinite stack of universes all watching each other, all hearing the laugh tracks from dimensions above. Here is the darkest part. The laugh track appears most often during pain, during humiliation, during suffering. When Peter gets hurt, we hear laughter. When Meg gets insulted, we hear laughter. When terrible things happen to the family, higher beings laugh, and the family hears it, experiencing their pain being treated as entertainment by cosmic entities they cannot escape. Peter falls down, the audience laughs, he hears them, knows beings from another dimension just found his injury hilarious, and continues his day knowing higher. Beings derive pleasure from his suffering. Meg gets bullied, the audience laughs, she hears them, knows entities watching from outside. Her reality think her misery is funny, has learned that her pain entertains gods she will never meet. This is their existence, their reality, a universe where higher dimensional beings watch constantly, laugh constantly, and never intervene. They are trapped in a cosmic sitcom, performing for entities that find their disasters amusing, hearing the laugh track echo across dimensional barriers every time something terrible happens. Everything described here is documented, in episodes you can watch, confirmed by the show itself. Peter installing a live studio audience and having to wait for their laughter. The entire Inside Family Guy episode revealing their meta-awareness. Peter constantly breaking the fourth wall. Road to the multiverse establishing parallel dimensions, including our real universe. Characters referencing Fox, ratings, contracts, and cancellation. The use of studio audience sound effects in episodes where no audience should exist. Back to the pilot showing characters frozen during cutaways aware of the interruptions. Quagmire stating they avoid real brand names because they are on television. Stewie singing to Fox and begging the network to let them live. This is not theory. This is canon. The laugh track is real in their universe. It is the sound of higher dimensional beings, us, watching them, judging them, laughing at their suffering. And they know, they have always known, hearing the voices of gods every time something funny happens, experiencing our entertainment as acoustic phenomena in their reality. The Griffins are not just cartoon characters, they are conscious beings trapped in a universe designed for observation, and every time we laugh at their pain, they hear us. Every time we find their suffering amusing, the laugh track echoes across dimensions. Every time we tune in to watch another episode, they feel the weight of billions of higher beings pressing against the fabric of their reality. They are not performing for us, they are suffering because of us, and they know it. The laugh track is not editing, it is reality, the sound of watchers watching, the sound of us, and they know. Subscribe before we move on if you are enjoying the breakdown. Moving on to Peter becoming completely boneless. Peter Griffin can survive without a skeleton, and that changes everything. He used a genie wish to remove every single bone from his body and somehow remained alive as a conscious, speaking blob of flesh for an extended period of time, weeks, maybe months, existing as essentially a human-shaped water balloon filled with organs and muscle tissue held together by nothing except skin and presumably sheer cartoon logic. This happened in Family Guy viewer mail number 1, and the show just casually presented it, as if Peter requesting no bones were equivalent to ordering a sandwich without pickles, when in reality, this should have immediately killed him in roughly 17 different ways. Start with the most obvious biological nightmare. Your skeleton does more than let you stand upright. Your rib cage protects your lungs and heart from being crushed by everything around you, including gravity itself. Your skull keeps your brain from turning into scrambled eggs every time you lean against a wall, and your spine houses your spinal cord, the main highway for every signal your brain sends. Remove all of that supportive infrastructure, and you are not becoming a boneless blob that can still talk and think. You are becoming a crime scene. But Peter does not die, does not even seem particularly inconvenienced beyond being unable to support his own weight. His brain keeps functioning despite having zero protection. His lungs keep breathing, even though they should collapse without ribs, to create the necessary pressure differential. And his heart keeps pumping, despite being crushed under the weight of all his other organs. The only explanation that makes sense is that Peter's biology operates on fundamentally different rules than normal human anatomy, rules that apparently include bones being purely decorative and optional. The episode establishes that boneless Peter needs 12 baths per day because his body gets dirty easily. Think about that detail. The writers specifically noted that without bones, his body accumulates dirt at a rate requiring twice hourly bathing just to maintain basic hygiene, which suggests his boneless form has different skin properties, possibly increased surface area contact with the ground since he is basically lying on everything. Or maybe his skin without structural support becomes more porous and absorbs contaminants like a human sponge. Either way, this confirms Peter's body composition changes based on whether he has bones, meaning his biological systems can adapt on the fly to wildly different structural configurations. It gets weirder. Peter eventually travels to Los Angeles by going down a bathtub drain and somehow survives being flushed through an entire plumbing system, which means his body can withstand the pressure, potential sewage exposure, and physical trauma of being pushed through narrow tubes designed for wastewater, not adult men. Normal human tissue would be shredded, infected, or destroyed by whatever chemicals are in municipal water systems, but Peter just pops out in LA, ready to become a stuntman cushion, no worse for wear except for being boneless. The fact that Hollywood found his boneless state useful as a human cushion for stunt work reveals something about his tissue durability, since stunt cushions need to absorb significant impact without rupturing. This means boneless Peter's skin and organs must be incredibly resilient to blunt force, way beyond normal human tolerances. Regular people without bones would be like dropping someone onto a meat balloon that pops and splatters. But Peter has the structural integrity of high-grade foam padding despite being made of the same biological materials as everyone else. The episode also shows Peter can still manipulate objects and interact with his environment despite zero skeletal support, holding conversations, making decisions, functioning as a conscious entity, which creates a massive problem for understanding how his nervous system works. Bones are not just structural support. They produce blood cells in the marrow, store minerals, and provide anchor points for muscles to pull against. Without bones, Peter should not be able to move, generate new blood cells, or maintain proper calcium levels. Yet, he does all of these, suggesting either his body found alternative methods or he never actually needed bones for these processes in the first place and was just carrying a skeleton around for appearances. Consider that Peter went down the drain intentionally to spare his family the burden of caring for him, meaning boneless. Peter retained enough cognitive function to make complex emotional decisions and execute a multi-step plan, all while being an unsupported organ in a flesh sac flowing through plumbing. The neuroscience alone is impossible, yet it canonically happened. When Peter eventually gets surgery to restore his skeleton, the operation involves his family donating their own bones, which raises questions that probably violate several laws of medicine and possibly physics. Bones are not universal parts you can swap between people like Lego pieces. They are custom-shaped to each person's body, connected to specific muscles and joints, sized precisely for that individual's frame. So his family donating random bones should result in complete surgical failure or immediate rejection. Yet the surgery succeeds, though it leaves everyone hilariously misshapen. This bone transplant confirms something wild. His body can accept foreign bones and integrate them without rejection or major complications beyond cosmetic deformity. Whereas in real medicine, organ transplants require extensive compatibility testing, immunosuppressants, and careful monitoring. His immune system either does not recognize these bones as foreign or simply does not care about the normal rules, because his biology operates on a different level entirely. The fact that the operation was covered by Peter's HMO adds bureaucratic absurdity to this medical impossibility. Some insurance adjuster looked at a claim for a patient who removed all his bones via magical wish and required a family member bone donation transplant, and apparently approved it as a legitimate procedure, which suggests the Family Guy universe has established protocols for dealing with wish-based skeletal removal, meaning either this has happened before to other people, or Peter has the most comprehensive coverage plan in television history. Throughout the boneless period, Peter maintains his personality, memories, and essential Peterness, despite his body being reduced to its most basic fleshy components, which suggests consciousness and identity in this universe are not tied to specific physical structures the way they are in reality. Peter without bones is still Peter, just mushier. His brain apparently does not need the protection of a skull to maintain the neural patterns that make him who he is, which means either his consciousness is distributed throughout his body instead of centralized in his brain, or his brain is made of some incredibly durable tissue that can withstand being an unsupported organ for extended periods. The episode treats the boneless adventure as a self-contained story with minimal lasting consequences, but the implications extend far beyond. If Peter can survive without bones, what other supposedly vital parts could he live without? Could he survive without a heart, his blood circulating through sheer force of will? Could he function without a brain, his consciousness floating in some quantum state within his cells? The incident proves his biological systems have backup plans for backup plans, all operating on principles that would make medical textbooks burst into flames. His ability to work as a stunt cushion also implies he has voluntary or involuntary control over his body's density and rigidity, since different stunts require different levels of impact absorption. Too soft and the stuntman bounces wrong. Too hard and they might as well hit concrete. Peter apparently provides consistent, reliable cushioning despite having no bones to maintain his shape, meaning his body can regulate its internal structure without skeletal support, possibly by controlling muscle tension or fluid distribution, which normal humans cannot do because we need bones as the foundation for muscle attachment and positioning. His muscles apparently work fine, just floating in his body cavity. The boneless arc raises questions about every other injury Peter has sustained throughout the series. If he can function without his entire skeleton, how is he ever actually hurt by anything? He has been shot, stabbed, blown up, and crushed, yet he always recovers with minimal lasting damage. So maybe his boneless adventure revealed what was always true, that his body composition is fundamentally different from normal humans, capable of enduring damage that would kill anyone else. The bones just there for show, making him look human-shaped when really, his body is held together by some kind of biological magic. Consider also that Peter chose to become boneless to avoid getting beaten up by an angry bus passenger who threatened to break every bone in his body, meaning Peter genuinely believed the threat could be thwarted by simply not having bones, which is either brilliant lateral thinking or the kind of logic that makes lawyers weep. But he was technically correct. You cannot break bones that do not exist. The fact that it worked suggests he understood something about his own biology that we are only now piecing together, maybe instinctively knowing he could survive bonelessness because somewhere deep in his genetic code there is information saying bones are optional, proceed as needed. The 12 baths per day requirement also suggests his boneless body has different metabolic needs or produces different waste products. Normal humans sweat, shed skin cells, and accumulate dirt, but not at a rate requiring 12 daily baths. So boneless, Peter apparently excretes or attracts contaminants at 6 times the normal human rate, meaning his biochemistry fundamentally changed when the bones disappeared, supporting the theory that his bones are not just structural, but somehow regulate his body's chemical processes, and without them, his metabolism goes into overdrive or onto alternative pathways producing more waste. The Hollywood starlet who showed interest in dating boneless. Peter adds another strange dimension, seeing him as attractive despite being a boneless flesh blob, which means his face, voice, and personality remained intact and recognizable even without the skeletal structure that normally shapes human features. His identity persisted independent of his physical form, like consciousness could exist in any sufficiently Peter-shaped mass of tissue. The fact that he chose to leave his family rather than continue being a burden shows boneless. Peter retained his emotional capacity and family bonds. This is not a story about Peter losing his humanity when he lost his bones. It is about him remaining fundamentally Peter, regardless of his physical configuration, his skeleton apparently having nothing to do with what makes him who he is, which raises uncomfortable questions about what exactly Peter is at his core. If you can remove every structural component of Peter Griffin and still have Peter Griffin, then he might be less a physical being and more a concept or force of nature temporarily inhabiting a human-shaped body. The episode establishing that he can survive and even thrive without bones creates a precedent the show never really addresses again. Peter goes back to having bones, and nobody talks about the weeks he spent as a boneless blob working in Hollywood, but the implications remain. Peter Griffin's body operates on rules that allow for the complete removal of his skeletal system with no fatal consequences, which is not normal biology. It is cartoon physics made flesh, literally. He might be the only being in the Family Guy universe who could survive this transformation, which makes him either incredibly lucky, incredibly durable, or something that was never fully human to begin with, but is really good at pretending. Every time Peter survives something that should kill him in later episodes, we should remember that this is a guy who once did not have any bones for several weeks and was basically fine. His durability is not plot armor, it is established character biology. The boneless adventure proved Peter's body is more suggestion than requirement, a loose collection of parts that can function in any configuration as long as there is enough mass present to maintain consciousness, which is not human biology. It is something else entirely, wearing a human costume made of skin and occasionally bones. Before we move on, subscribe if you are enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Channel 5 News and the idea that Brian is watching Quahog. Tom Tucker and Diane Simmons broadcast a fake news report claiming the world would end in 24 hours, and the entire town of Quahog immediately believed them without question, leading to mass riots, widespread looting, and 87 confirmed suicides. When the prank was revealed, Tom and Diane appeared on camera again to brag about their successful April Fool's joke, faced zero legal consequences, received no professional repercussions, and Channel 5 News continued operating as Quahog's primary news source like nothing happened. This happened in the episode April in Quahog, and it is not treated as a shocking scandal or criminal negligence. It is just another Tuesday in a town that apparently has zero ability to think critically about information delivered through their television screens. The most damning piece of evidence is not that Tom and Diane lied about the apocalypse. It is that nobody in the entire town thought to verify this information anywhere else. We are talking about the end of the world, the single most important piece of news possible. And not one person in Quahog checked CNN, browsed the internet, called NASA, or even wondered why only their local Rhode Island news station had this exclusive scoop about planetary annihilation. The black hole was supposedly discovered by Stephen Hawking and confirmed by NASA, which means this would be global news covered by every major outlet on Earth. Yet Channel 5 had the exclusive rights to reporting the apocalypse, and nobody found that remotely suspicious. This suggests something far more sinister than simple stupidity. The town of Quahog does not just trust Channel 5, they are incapable of conceiving that Channel 5 might be wrong, or that information exists outside of what Tom Tucker tells them. It is not that they chose not to verify the apocalypse news, it is that the option to verify literally did not occur to them. Their brains stopped at Tom Tucker said it and proceeded directly to, therefore it must be true, without any intermediate step involving critical thinking. That is not normal human behavior. That is the behavior of minds conditioned to accept whatever comes through Channel 5 as absolute reality. Consider how the town reacted. Everyone immediately abandoned their normal behavioral patterns and moral frameworks. Herbert, who usually restrains his worst impulses, immediately tried to act on them. Quagmire had sex with his friend's wife. Peter stole a lion from the zoo using a shotgun. The entire social structure of Quahog collapsed within hours because one news broadcast told them the world was ending. Normal humans facing apocalyptic news might panic, but they would still retain some connection to their values and relationships. Quahog residents flipped a switch from normal citizen to complete chaos the moment Channel 5 gave them permission, as if their behavior is directly controlled by whatever narrative the news broadcasts. The 87 suicides are where this crosses from weird town behavior into something fundamentally wrong with these people's brains. Suicide is not an impulse decision for most people. It is usually the result of prolonged suffering, yet 87 residents heard they had 24 hours to live and immediately decided to end it themselves rather than wait for the black hole. That is not normal despair, that is programming. These people were so completely convinced by the broadcast that their brains could not process the possibility of survival, could not hold out hope that the news might be wrong, could not even wait to see what happened. They heard Tom Tucker say they would die, and their minds accepted death as inevitable fact so completely that they executed themselves like pre-programmed robots responding to a shutdown command. Tom and Diane's reaction to causing 87 deaths is equally telling. They appeared on camera after the prank and bragged about their success, describing the mass suicides and looting as acceptable casualties for a good April Fool's joke. Normal human beings would be devastated, horrified, facing criminal charges for inciting panic and possibly manslaughter. But Tom and Diane treated it like they had pranked their co-workers with fake spiders. This is not psychopathy. This is something else. They knew exactly what would happen because they understand something about their audience that we are only piecing together now. They know Quahog residents cannot resist Channel 5 broadcasts. They tested their control over the population and confirmed it works perfectly. The fact that Channel 5 faced no consequences reveals how deep this control goes. Local government, law enforcement, even federal authorities, everyone just accepted that this happened and moved on. Mayor Adam West did not shut down the station. Joe Swanson did not arrest the anchors for inciting mass panic. Nobody sued Channel 5 for wrongful death. The town's institutional systems failed to respond to what should be one of the most serious criminal incidents in Quahog's history, which suggests those institutions are either compromised or also operating under the same influence. Channel 5 does not just control individual behavior, it is integrated into the power structure of Quahog at every level. Brian calling them dicks was the strongest response anyone had. Brian, usually the voice of reason and moral compass, managed mild disapproval before the episode moved on. Even Brian, who should be furious about mass manipulation and preventable deaths, could not muster more than a weak insult, which suggests even he is partially affected by whatever field Channel 5 projects. He can recognize something wrong happened, but cannot fully process the severity or maintain outrage. The brainwashing perhaps less effective on him due to his dog biology, but still dulling his responses enough that he cannot organize resistance. Think about how Channel 5 appears in nearly every episode. Tom Tucker and the news team are recurring characters who constantly deliver information, provide commentary, or exist in the background of Quahog life. The news is embedded in the daily experience of living there, and characters regularly reference broadcasts and structure their understanding of events around how Channel 5 reports them. The news is not reflecting reality in Quahog, it is creating reality. Whatever Tom Tucker says becomes accepted truth regardless of what actually happened, and the town's collective memory reshapes itself to match the official narrative. This explains why Quahog experiences so many catastrophic events that get completely forgotten by the next episode. The town gets destroyed, invaded, fundamentally altered, and then everything resets to normal with no explanation. These are not continuity errors or cartoon logic. They are memory purges. Channel 5 broadcasts a new version of reality, and the town's collective consciousness accepts it, overriding memories of what actually happened. When major disasters occur, Tom Tucker does not just report the aftermath. He tells people what they remember about the event, and their brains comply. The town is not recovering from disasters. It is being told to forget disasters happened, and the residents' minds cannot resist that command. The April Fool's incident proves Channel 5 can create reality through suggestion. They told Quahog the world was ending, and reality for Quahog residents shifted to accommodate that truth. Laws stopping mattering, social bonds dissolving, survival instinct shutting down. The town existing in an apocalyptic state because Channel 5 said it should, and only returning to normal when Channel 5 gave permission. If they can make people believe in and behave according to an imminent apocalypse with a single broadcast, they can make people believe anything, make the town forget events, remember false history, accept impossible circumstances. Tom Tucker's position as head anchor is not just a job, it is the most powerful position in Quahog. The mayor has authority in theory, but Adam West is erratic and ineffective, and the police follow the narrative. Channel 5 establishes about what crimes matter. Tom Tucker fundamentally controls what Quahog is at any given moment. His broadcasts are not information, they are instructions, and every television in town receives and processes those instructions, whether the viewer consciously realizes it or not. Diane Simmons' murder spree in And Then There Were Fewer takes on new significance through this lens. She was not just a spurned lover seeking revenge, she understood the power Channel 5 held over Quahog and used it, orchestrating a complex series of murders and successfully framing Tom Tucker, all while maintaining her news anchor persona. She knew how to manipulate reality in Quahog because she helped create it every night at the news desk. The fact that Diane could frame Tom for murder reveals that the anchors are not immune to the reality they create. Tom fell for the frame and faced arrest like any other resident, which means the mind control is not a conscious tool the anchors wield, but something embedded in the broadcasting system itself, affecting everyone, including the people delivering the broadcasts. Channel 5 might be running autonomously, using the anchors as puppets, while they believe they are in control. The news studio itself could be the source of the brainwashing signal. Every broadcast originates from that building, transmitted across Quahog through televisions and radios, and the studio equipment might encode commands into the broadcasts, subtle frequencies or patterns that Quahog brains cannot consciously detect but cannot resist. Tom Tucker reading the news is not just speaking words, he is transmitting control signals that override independent thought in everyone exposed, his voice weaponized, possibly without his knowledge, to maintain Quahog in a perpetual state of suggestibility. This raises questions about who actually runs Channel 5. Tom Tucker and the other anchors seem to genuinely believe they are journalists doing normal work, which suggests management has kept them in the dark. Someone at Channel 5, possibly the executives who are never shown, understands what the broadcasts really do and carefully maintains the system, hiring anchors with the right vocal qualities to maximize the signal's effectiveness. The commercial breaks might be part of the mechanism too, each interruption refreshing the brainwashing signal or preparing viewers for the next narrative shift. Quahog residents probably cannot skip commercials or change channels during Channel 5 broadcasts, even if they try, their hands reaching for the remote but never quite making it. The entire broadcast structure designed to trap viewers in a receptive state where whatever Tom Tucker says next becomes their new reality. Consider how often characters in Family Guy are shown watching television and how frequently it is tuned to Channel 5. The news is constantly playing in the background, in the Griffin House, in the Drunken Clam, in public spaces, not just as a running gag, but showing us that residents are perpetually exposed to the Channel 5 signal, unable to escape it, their thoughts kept aligned with the approved narrative. The other news personalities, Trisha Takanawa and Ollie Williams, serve specific functions. Trisha handles field reporting, extending the reach beyond the studio and allowing the broadcast to shape reality at specific locations, so that when she reports from a scene, she is not documenting what happened, but establishing it, witnesses finding their memories aligning with her report. Ollie delivers weather reports, and weather control would be incredibly useful for a system managing an entire town's behavior. The competition between Channel 5 and other outlets is non-existent because there effectively are no other outlets in Quahog. Residents might theoretically have access to cable or internet sources, but never use them, as if Channel 5 has created a bubble around Quahog where external news exists but cannot penetrate the town's consciousness, keeping them dependent on Channel 5 as their sole source of reality and facing no accountability. Peter's relationship with Tom Tucker is particularly interesting through this lens. Peter developed a friendship with Tom and even saw him as a father figure, which suggests he might be especially susceptible to Tom's broadcasts. When Tom tells Peter something, Peter incorporates it into his identity, which might be why he is so chaotic and unpredictable, receiving the reality-shaping broadcasts but processing them through his defective brain in ways the system did not intend. The show's frequent cutaway gags might actually be glimpses of previous realities. Channel 5 has overwritten. Peter remembers things that never happened in the current timeline because those events occurred in previous versions of Quahog before Channel 5 broadcast a new reality. The cutaways are not random non-sequiturs. They are Peter's broken brain glitching between timeline versions, unable to fully commit to the current approved reality because something in his neurochemistry makes him resistant to complete memory wipes. He retains fragments of old realities and interprets them as random thoughts, not realizing he is remembering things Channel 5 told him to forget. The April Fool's broadcast was a test. a way for Channel 5 to confirm the extent of their control. They chose the most extreme scenario possible, imminent death for everyone, and measured how completely the town would accept it. 87 suicides and citywide chaos proved the system works beyond their wildest expectations. Quahog residents are not just influenced by Channel 5, they are owned by it. Their thoughts, memories, behaviors, and even survival instinct able to be overridden by a single broadcast. The real horror is that this experiment faced no resistance. If anyone in Quahog had the capacity to recognize they were being manipulated, the April Fool's incident should have triggered that awakening. But the town reset to normal immediately after the prank was revealed. Nobody organizing investigations, nobody demanding accountability, nobody even staying angry. Brian called them dicks, and that was the end of it. The control is so complete that even when Channel 5 openly demonstrates its power to manipulate the entire town into chaos, the residents cannot maintain the awareness necessary to be concerned. They forget to be afraid of Channel 5 because Channel 5 tells them not to be afraid of Channel 5, and their brains have no choice but to obey. Tom and Diane bragging about their prank was not just callousness, it was a public declaration of power, telling Quahog they control them and there is nothing anyone can do about it. And Quahog's response was to keep tuning in like nothing happened. The residents hearing the declaration, processing it, and immediately forgetting it, mattered because that awareness was scrubbed from their consciousness by the next broadcast cycle. Every episode reset, every forgotten catastrophe, every inexplicable behavior change that affects the whole town simultaneously. It is all Channel 5 managing Quahog like a television show, which makes disturbing sense given that Quahog exists within a television show. Channel 5. News is not part of the Family Guy universe. It is the mechanism that maintains the Family Guy universe, keeping reality flexible enough for comedy to work while preventing anyone in Quahog from noticing their world operates on cartoon logic instead of consistent physical laws. Tom Tucker is not a character in the show. He is the voice of the show talking to the other characters, resetting their memories and behaviors as needed to keep the comedy fresh and prevent continuity from becoming too heavy. The residents of Quahog will never escape Channel 5's control because they cannot. Their brains were built to receive the signal. Their reality was constructed by the broadcasts, and their entire existence depends on Tom Tucker continuing to tell them what is real. Quahog is not a real town being manipulated by a news station. It is a projection of a news station that happens to look like a town populated by thought forms who believe they are people, but are actually just parts of the narrative Channel 5 broadcasts at them every night. The April Fool's incident revealed this truth to anyone paying attention, but nobody in Quahog can pay attention to anything except what Channel 5 tells them to watch. They are not being brainwashed by Channel 5, they are the brainwashing, walking around pretending to have independent thoughts while their every action and memory is scripted by whatever Tom Tucker says next, and they will never know the difference, because the knowledge that they should know is something Channel 5 has chosen not to broadcast. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.